Batman Arkham Asylum is one of the greatest video games I've ever played. When it released in the summer of 2009, it blew me away with how well it adapted its superhero license, and you really get a sense of the passion and drive the developer Rocksteady had for the project. They dove into the vast history of Batman comics as an inspiration for the game's overall look and design, focusing on the works of Frank Miller, Neil Adams, and most notably, Grant Morrison's Arkham Asylum, a serious house on Sirius Earth, released in 1989. The game's story was written by Paul Dini, who has been the creative force behind some of my favorite Batman comics, such as 2008's Heart of Hush. He also wrote some of the best episodes of the highly acclaimed Batman animated series, like Joker's Favor, Almost Got Him, The Man Who Killed Batman, and Heart of Ice, which not only won a Daytime Emmy Award for its writing, but is also the best episode of the entire series, in my opinion. Arkham Asylum went in a much darker and mature direction than many of the Batman games and even television shows we had seen up until that point. Apart from some of the live-action films and a few notable comics over the years, I'd argue Arkham Asylum is one of the eeriest and realistic depictions of the Dark Knight and his rogues gallery we've had in mainstream media. Now, before I fully begin this review, it's already obvious by now that I'm playing the remastered version of the game on PlayStation 4 that was released in 2016. Though the original will always have a special place in my heart, I do consider this remaster to be the definitive way to play the game. Many consider the brighter colors and look of everything to be a hindrance to the overall atmosphere compared to the darker look of the original, but I actually find it to be a lot better. The world feels much more alive, and the improved sky effects and rain outside add to its atmosphere. During the Predator encounter in the medical facility in the PS3 version, you could actually hear thunder outside, but due to the console's limitations at the time, Rocksteady were unable to feature a weather system in the final game. The story of Arkham Asylum sees Batman capture the Joker after he attacks Gotham City Hall, and brings him to the infamous psychiatric hospital for the criminally insane. Very early on, Batman reveals that Joker gave up without a fight, and he believes getting caught was all part of his plan. Sure enough, the Clown Prince of Crime escapes, and with the help of his accomplice and main squeeze, Harley Quinn, takes control over the asylum and frees all its inmates, trapping the Arkham staff and Batman himself in this living hell on Earth. Like I said, the storyline was a lot darker than what mainstream audiences were accustomed to at the time. Though the game has a T for teen rating, it does feature some disturbing elements and gruesome deaths, such as Penelope Young's in the warden's office, and especially Frank Bowles when his trail you were following runs cold. Batman loses just as much as he wins in this game. Not everyone gets saved, and there isn't that typical light at the end of the tunnel that you usually find in many superhero stories. There is a strong sense of familiarity with this game for anyone who grew up with Batman the Animated Series. Not only was it written by Paul Dini, but it features the voice talents of Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill, and Arlene Sorkin, who reprised their roles of Batman, the Joker, and Harley Quinn respectively. Despite moments of humor, for the most part, the Joker and Harley are played in a much darker and threatening way that hadn't really been seen from them before, at least not since Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker, for example. Being that the story centers around Batman and the Joker primarily, I feel the side characters in this game and the cast of other main supervillains to be the weakest in the franchise so far. Arkham Asylum was supposed to feature plot elements bringing a lot more of Batman's major rogues into the fray, like Two-Face for example, but Rocksteady felt they didn't fit the tone of the rest of the game, so they were cut out. Honestly though, having everything center on Batman chasing the Joker makes Arkham Asylum the most linear and focused of the entire series, and I think its story benefits from it in the long run. Though it's not the best title in the franchise, I think Arkham Asylum has the best story, if that makes any sense to you. Villains like Poison Ivy, Scarecrow, and Bane all fit into the story quite well, seeing as the Joker plans to use Bane's Venom formula to create a new powerful drug named Titan to unleash an army of superpowered monsters on Gotham. Joker injects Ivy with the drug as well, essentially for a laugh, to see what happens, and I guess take her out of the picture, not to mention use her as a distraction. Scarecrow plays a similar role, attacking Batman on a psychological level while all this is happening. In fact, his attacks were methodical, heavily planned for weeks if not months. So both Poison Ivy and Scarecrow are firmly ingrained within this narrative and are given a lot to do. Unfortunately, some of the other villains either don't or are criminally underused, such as Victor Zsasz and even Scarface, which I believe would have been a great opportunity to incorporate the ventriloquist Arnold Wesker somewhere in the facility too, or, despite his awesome design, are simply pointless additions which don't really add anything to the overall story like Killer Croc, surprisingly, which we'll get to later. Now I want to discuss the gameplay of Batman Arkham Asylum because this is where it stands head and shoulders above many other superhero games in the genre. The free-flow combat which Rocksteady developed was revolutionary, a game-changer. It didn't involve any preset button sequences, and the player could chain any number of Batman's moves together to make one continuous combo. It made you really feel like Batman, even though you did become a bit overpowered by the end, with the upgrade allowing you to perform special combo moves after 5 hits rather than 8. Compared to newer installments in this series, I do admit that this one shows its age a bit more, and is duller by comparison. I feel like it's very repetitive by the game's end, but that's just because there isn't as much variety compared to what would be implemented in later titles. The fighting system that originated in the Arkham series was so amazing that it's been the influence for many others found in superhero games. No matter what Arkham title you play, it's really fun picking off goons one by one from the shadows as Batman, but much like the free-flow combat found in the game, I feel the Predator encounters fall a bit flat now too. I mean, I still enjoy them, this type of gameplay never really gets old and the atmosphere helps with all of it, but the AI is more predictable than newer installments, and despite the countless ways you can take out enemies, the other games have much more variety, which keeps every encounter fresh. Apart from some of the later sequences, which have all the gargoyles booby-trapped if you grapple up to them, there isn't much challenge even on the hardest difficulty. It desperately needs some detective vision scrambling, or floor mines, which of course the newer games brought to the table. Arkham Asylum's Predator encounters are still fun, don't get me wrong, but unless you actively force yourself to change your strategy, the game doesn't make you all that much. You can more or less attack each of these segments the same way, each and every time if you wanted to, and there's nothing really stopping you from doing that. Not to mention, detective vision can become your crutch in this game. You can always leave it on. Again, the game doesn't throw you any curveballs to reduce your usage of it, or eliminate it altogether. The worst aspect of this game for me from a purely gameplay perspective are the detective sequences. Apart from the fast-paced, intelligent, and clever dialogue between Batman and Oracle, which give you a firm sense of their problem-solving detective skills, you don't really feel like one yourself. They all involve finding a specific item within a closed-off area related to the character in question you are tracking, and then you simply follow a trail of particle residue in the air or blood on the ground. That's it. You just run around from point A to point B, and there isn't much to it at all. It gets very repetitive and boring, and is by far the most disappointing thing in the game for me, especially on each new replay. Thankfully, later installments would remedy this, adding in a lot more variety and incorporating the use of a few more gadgets at your disposal. The inclusion of the Riddler helps out a bit with all this repetitiveness though, and his challenges are quite enjoyable. I think the trophies and Joker teeth get a bit annoying, and honestly at this point in the franchise I hope they remove physical Riddler trophies altogether, but the actual riddles themselves that have you looking for a specific Easter egg in the environment that relates to a character or villain in Batman mythology is exciting. It makes the game world feel more alive, and gives you a reason to explore the entirety of Arkham Island. Though it isn't the largest environment in the Arkham series, I find the riddles and hidden Easter eggs in Arkham Asylum to be the most rewarding and memorable in my opinion. The buildings you explore have a greater sense of history to them, and an unsettling tone and atmosphere. Some of the things you find are downright creepy, and in some cases you almost feel as though you weren't supposed to find them. The boss battles in Arkham Asylum aren't that impressive compared to the other games in the franchise. Actually, they aren't really boss battles at all, and instead are glorified henchman fights like Bane for example. You engage him in the same way you would one of the Titan-infused brutes, by throwing a batarang at him until he runs into a wall, attack him enough times until you break off one of his venom tubes, and take out the small group of inmates he sends your way, rinse and repeat. Despite Bane being one of the more physical threats to Batman in this game, compared to the other rogues featured in it, his boss battle is one of the most basic. If I were to be completely honest with you though, the Killer Croc section is the most annoying and unappealing villain confrontation in the game to me the more times I play it now. At first it was actually a very terrifying sequence, with him popping out of the sewer water and you having to react fast enough with a batarang before he dragged you down for an instant kill. It was quite effective. However, the more times I sit through this game, the more formulaic and predictable it becomes. I mean, if you factor out all the scary sounds and jump scares, there really isn't much to it. All you do is throw batarangs, that's it. There are a few parts where you have to use your line launcher, causing Croc to reach out of the water at you, which is kind of cool, and when he starts breaking the boards below you, forcing you to run a short distance, but it's not enough variety to keep this whole section interesting to me. The fact that they get you to move as slow as possible doesn't help either, and drags this lengthy and fairly boring sequence out a lot longer than it needs to be. It just becomes a distraction to help pad out the game's runtime. I mean, you're only down there collecting spores for an antidote. The fact that the plants are only found in Killer Croc's lair feels forced and unnecessary, a convenience for the plot, and a way for the developers to squeeze Killer Croc in. The Scarecrow is my all-time favorite Batman villain, and it pleases me to say that he gets a lot of spotlight in this game. He's the second biggest antagonist and most prominent threat next to the Joker himself. Though his nightmare sequences aren't necessarily that challenging, and you don't really fight him from a physical standpoint, instead just avoid his gaze and shine a bat signal at him at the end of each segment, his sections are still very effective and are by far the most memorable parts of the entire game. Like I said, they aren't really that challenging, which could be viewed as a disappointment to some, but what they lack in difficulty, they make up for in atmosphere and storytelling. They dive into the mind, inner demons, and personal fears of Batman, from the death of his parents and his feelings of guilt, not being able to stop the man responsible, to the death of himself, the end of his crusade, and the similarities he shares with his rogues gallery imprisoned at Arkham. The game even manages to bring the player into the experience as well, having the game seemingly freeze at one point and crash, before restarting with the opening cinematic, this time with the roles reversed. Joker driving Batman to the asylum, with Harley Quinn, Zsasz, Scarface, and Scarecrow acting as members of security, the Warden, and a doctor respectively. Scarecrow, much like Bane and Killer Croc, doesn't have much of a boss fight in this game, though the ending of his final sequence sort of resembles one. His encounters are my favorite part of Arkham Asylum. I just wish they were a bit longer and posed more of a challenge gameplay-wise. Speaking of challenge, the only real boss fight that poses a significant one would have to be Poison Ivy and her giant plant. She's definitely the best boss battle Arkham Asylum has to offer, though that isn't saying much, is it? It features multiple stages, requires you to use quick reflexes to dodge high-damaging vines, especially on the hardest difficulty, as well as throwing batarangs at Ivy when the time is right. You also have to multitask and prioritize, while she sends mind control security guards your way. When I was younger and first played this game, Poison Ivy's inclusion and prominent role in its story wasn't something I fully supported. She was never that interesting to me as a character, and her boss fight was one of the weaker aspects of the game. In recent years, however, I have grown to admire it, seeing it as the best boss battle Arkham Asylum gives us, at least from the main supervillains that is. Its strategy and direction of attack stands out from all the rest despite its repetitive nature. Scarecrow might have the best and most memorable sequences found within the game, stronger than any other villain in my opinion, but Poison Ivy has the best boss battle following the typical formula that makes up one. Now, the quality of the final confrontation with the Joker has been the discussion of many people on the internet. I would have to agree with everyone in saying that it's very disappointing and a somewhat sour conclusion to an otherwise perfect game. With that said, I think fans are a bit too harsh on it, especially when you take into account Rocksteady and really Paul Dini backing themselves into a corner with this story in relation to the game itself, and let me explain. The Joker has never really been much of a physical threat to Batman. When the two do fight, it usually doesn't last for very long, or implements the usage of weapons or barriers on the Joker's end to prevent fisticuffs by any means necessary, because the Joker knows he will lose on that battlefield. The character is strongest when the hero is a few steps behind him. The build-up is more important than the payoff in many instances. When you have a video game that isn't as scripted as, say, a movie or television show, it becomes extremely difficult to control the elements of that confrontation, especially with how overpowered you've made Batman and the player from a gameplay perspective. There was no way you were going to be able to battle the Joker from a physical standpoint in this game and have it be challenging and gratifying at the same time. They had to make him bigger, they had to inject him with the Titan formula. And I know the battle itself is extremely repetitive, barely has you attacking the Joker and instead just basic goons, and the whole transformation itself was kind of forced and out of left field, but what else were they going to do? The only way I could see this ending working better would be to have a large Predator encounter with you picking off goons one by one and getting to the Joker without being seen for one last takedown. He could have taken the Commissioner hostage, or maybe even someone else close to Batman like Oracle. That would have worked a lot better in my opinion. The boss battle we got was a bit of a joke and honestly seems like something that could have been found much earlier in the game. It's not that challenging, but like I said, with a character like the Joker, with how powerful Batman is with the free flow combat, there wasn't much more they could really do. I think with how strong the story had been up until that point, the ending battle was destined to be disappointing no matter what. The Joker should not be the final boss in a game like this, and it's something the developers realized moving on to Arkham City, preventing that game from digging itself a hole like this one did. The issues I have with Arkham Asylum are fairly superficial though, and simply come down to nitpicking. There are problems with it of course, but none of them game-breaking. They all deserve a pass, seeing as it was the first installment in the franchise. It set the foundation for future games in the series, and when it was released, it revolutionized and transformed the very landscape of the genre. It made us care about superhero games again. Like I said earlier on in this video, Arkham Asylum is the most linear and focused of all the Arkham games. Though I find its direct sequel, Arkham City, to be the best title in the franchise and the greatest superhero game ever made, Arkham Asylum does have a stronger story in my opinion, because it doesn't stretch itself too thin or have the player distracted by anything else going on. It gets right to the point and remains focused on the task at hand. It doesn't stray from it in any way. Arkham Asylum was in many ways a test. Rocksteady was able to make a successful game based off a superhero license, and were then free to build upon it, making everything even bigger and better for the sequel. Next time, I'll be reviewing 2011's Batman Arkham City. Once again, the Return to Arkham version will be the one I'm playing. It's without a doubt my favorite superhero game ever made, and I think I've got lots to say about it. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Batman Arkham Asylum was damn near flawless, apart from the final battle with the Joker, which was mindless as all hell, and honestly unimpressive that far into the game. The rest was extraordinary. Its gameplay, strong focused narrative, and haunting atmosphere, filled to the brim with Easter eggs and riddles that kept you fully immersed, was a breath of fresh air, especially with the landscape of superhero games at the time. When Rocksteady announced a sequel, Arkham City, for an October 2011 release, the entire gaming community turned their head. How would they improve upon the original? How could they hope to surpass what was essentially the perfect superhero game at the time? Well, folks, they did. Arkham City is not only the best installment the Batman Arkham franchise has to offer, but in my opinion, it still ranks as one of the greatest video games ever made. It's my personal favorite of all time, superhero or otherwise. In many ways, Arkham Asylum was a way for Rocksteady to test the waters with this Batman concept. They did as much as they could, with as little as possible, which is why Asylum focused mainly on the Joker and Scarecrow, and held out on including a wider variety of mainstay Batman villains, such as Two-Face, Penguin, Mr. Freeze, etc. They didn't want to overload everything until they knew they had something great on their hands. After the critical and commercial success of Arkham Asylum, Time Warner acquired the majority stake of Rocksteady Studios, and the floodgates were opened. With Arkham City, everything was about to become bigger and better. 1 year after the events of Arkham Asylum, billionaire Bruce Wayne holds a press conference outside the walls of Arkham City, a new mega-prison built around the old, decaying slums of Gotham, after the original asylum was deemed unfit for inmates. Tiger mercenaries employed by Hugo Strange, the prison's warden, capture Wayne and throw him into Arkham City. Strange tortures him and comes to the realization Bruce Wayne is Batman. He also speaks about the mysterious Protocol 10, which will commence in a few hours. After Strange's mercenaries release Wayne into the belly of the beast, he escapes a beatdown at the hands of the Penguin and contacts Alfred, who delivers a batsuit to him, something he'll need to conquer this hellhole. At first, your main objective is uncovering what Protocol 10 is, but early on, the Joker captures Batman and performs a blood transfusion on him, which infects him with the same fatal disease the Joker is dying from, poisoned by the mutating properties of the Titan formula he injected in himself at the end of the first game. From that point on, the narrative centers around finding a cure, saving Gotham because Joker has shipped more of his blood to hospitals all across the city, putting innocents in danger, and of course, discovering the secrets behind Protocol 10 and stopping Hugo Strange. There was a lot more going on in Arkham City than there was in Arkham Asylum. It's far more complicated, but with a cast of characters this wide, it makes sense. They all have their own distinct motives and are driven by different things. From the very moment you are thrown in Arkham City, you feel the scale of this game world, much larger and busy than Arkham Asylum was. In many ways, it's somewhat overwhelming, especially when you realize just how much things there are to do as Batman at any given time. With the thought of Protocol 10 and Batman slowly dying in your subconscious mind, it gives this game a sense of time, even if there isn't a stopwatch anywhere to be found, and as you stray away from the story collecting riddles or completing side missions, which are new in this game, Batman doesn't show any physical signs of the sickness in terms of gameplay. But it's fine because again, death is always on your subconscious mind, and the game reminds you of it frequently enough to keep it there. Batman's face begins to change as you progress. He looks like death itself by the end. Hugo Strange is an effective antagonist, and in some ways he could be viewed as the main villain of the game. Well, sort of. I think Arkham City depicts his obsession with Batman quite strongly, and once he finds out his true identity, you can tell he feels as though he has unlocked the secrets to the universe. You'd think he'd sell this knowledge to the highest bidder or something, like some of his previous incarnations, but no. This secret is his key to impressing the real mastermind behind Arkham City, Ra's al Ghul. Ra's, who Batman is forced to encounter earlier in the game to get a sample of his blood in order for Mr. Freeze to synthesize a cure, is revealed to be the man in charge of everything going on. Sometime following Strange's disappearance from Arkham Asylum, he confronted him with this scheme and provided Strange with limitless resources to get the job done. Protocol 10 is essentially targeted missile strikes on Arkham City, which are intended to kill all criminals within it, cleansing the world of its so-called filth. Again, much like Hugo Strange, I feel this story understands the themes behind Ra's al Ghul, and Protocol 10 is something I can see him doing. Paul Dini, of course, returned to write the story of this game, and it's brilliant, something we hadn't seen before, and balances all the villains within it quite well, for the most part. The only one I feel was executed poorly was Two-Face, the character I was most excited for going into this game. He appears at the beginning with a fun, although brief sequence, where you have to save Catwoman from him before he can give her an acid bath. At the end of the combat encounter, he shoots you with his handgun and then is scratched by Catwoman and roped up by Batman. And you never see him again in the game's story. I'm fucking serious, it was kind of insulting. He does return in the final Catwoman mission in a boss fight of sorts, within a Predator area you can either take your time with, or rush through, your pick, but it's still very underwhelming. Two-Face deserved much better. Sadly, his treatment in Arkham Knight, though an improvement over City's, still falls flat. Hopefully, if we ever get another Batman Arkham game, Two-Face has a more prominent role in it, maybe even as one of the main villains. The Penguin is also done really well in Arkham City, and is featured for a good chunk of it. You go to the Natural History Museum, which acts as Penguin's fortress, and fight your way to him, going through a giant shark and even Solomon Grundy of all people to do so. The Penguin had kidnapped Mr. Freeze, and stolen his freeze gun as well, which he uses against you. This part of the game is one of my favorites, because it's like one big gauntlet set up by the Penguin. It's great. And speaking of Mr. Freeze, let's talk about him now. Apart from the one featured in Batman the Animated Series, this is my second favorite incarnation of the character outside of comics, the one found within the Arkham games. He is voiced by Maurice LaMarche, and he is written perfectly here. After you rescue him from the Penguin, he helps Batman find a cure for his fatal disease, one that he was working on for the Joker after the clown had stolen his wife Nora to use as leverage against him. You even track down Nora for Victor in a side mission, which brings his story full circle when they get reunited. I do have a few nitpicks in regards to Mr. Freeze in Arkham City, but we'll get back to that later. So the time has come to discuss the Joker. He takes more of a backseat in this game compared to Asylum, at least for the first 2/3 or so, popping up at the end for a whopper of a reveal. They use him when necessary, and don't shove him down your throat like some other appearances of this character, taking the spotlight from other villains, and he doesn't overstay his welcome here, it's just right. Mark Hamill returns to voice him, and it might be one of his best Joker performances of his career. Throughout the game, he sends voice messages to you that poke fun at Batman, go into their complicated relationship, and even discuss death in general. Many of them are profound, and you really learn how the Joker ticks. You see a side of the villain you've never seen before, a vulnerability. Joker is dying in this game, and as the story progresses, he looks worse and worse. The end is definitely near. However, the game plays tricks on you by having you encounter a healthier looking Joker towards the end that makes you believe he has acquired the cure, the one he has Harley Quinn steal from Freeze. After you shut down Protocol 10, Joker kidnaps Talia al Ghul, which forces you to face off with him in the Monarch Theater to rescue her. But in a peculiar reveal, after Talia stabs him and seemingly kills Joker, you see that he is still alive and sick, worse than he's ever been before, which is puzzling. The healthy Joker turns out to be Basil Karlo, Clayface, who took on the role of a lifetime by impersonating Joker in Arkham City to help maintain his control over the prison with the gang war going on between him, Penguin, and Two-Face. After you fight Clayface, Joker orders you to give him half of the cure, which Batman is willing to do. However, Joker stabs Batman's arm and the vial drops, shattering on the floor. It's in this instance that you as the player realize what is about to happen. Joker is seconds from death, with no cure, no way of getting one. It's all over. With a final laugh, he chuckles in his weakened state and dies with a smile on his face. Honestly, I don't think anyone thought Joker would actually die in this game, that Rocksteady would have the balls to do it, but they did, and subverted our expectations in the process. It's one of the most powerful endings to a video game I have ever seen. In hindsight, the Joker's death as well as the Clayface reveal was hinted at throughout the game in various ways. If you stay in the church tower at the beginning and don't jump out the window, Joker foreshadows to you that all this will end with one of them dying and the other standing over their corpse. In the steel mill, when Joker proclaims to his gang that he has returned, the camera shakes and you can hear a cough, meaning the real Joker is behind it. The answers were right in front of our noses the whole time.
Now think about it. Imagine your favorite TV show. You've been through it all, the ups, the downs, the crazy coincidences, and then bang! They tell you what it's all about. Would you be happy? Does it make sense? How come it all ended in a church? You guys just need to know one simple thing. I'm back. Back for good.
Okay, wow. Talking about the story took longer than I expected, but once again, this is a much more complicated narrative compared to Arkham Asylum, so there was a lot to go through. Let's finally discuss the gameplay. Like I said, everything is bigger and better in Arkham City. The free-flow combat system has been expanded upon to feature a lot more combat moves at your disposal, such as beatdowns, aerial attacks, ultra stuns, bat swarms, disarm and destroys, new animations with takedowns and counters, allowing you to counter 2, even 3 times at once, and more enemy types that you will need to use all these moves in different combinations to defeat. They also added more quick-fire gadget compatibility with the explosive gel and Batclaw, for example. The Batclaw Slam is incredibly addictive and only got more badass as the series progressed. The combat system is incredibly responsive in this game and plays like a dream, much smoother than Arkham Asylum's and even Arkham Origins. Arkham City features a much larger game world than Arkham Asylum, with a lot more outside exploration, so they needed a way for you to traverse from one side of the map to the other quickly and efficiently. You couldn't just run from point A to point B like in Asylum. Arkham City introduced a gliding mechanic that is very addictive and feels very Batman-like. You use your grapnel gun to boost yourself into the sky, and then swoop down in intervals to maintain as much height and momentum as you can to stay airborne. You can travel all over Arkham City without having to touch the ground once. It works really well, and was a much-needed addition to the series. Many fans wanted to see the Batmobile make an appearance in Arkham City, but I was never one of them. It would have made for some fun eye candy and fan service, sure, but without any real purpose within the game's narrative, it would have felt pointless and unnecessary. The Batman Arkham games don't really need driving mechanics in any way. They focus on exploration, detective work, and combat for the most part. I never wanted a Batmobile. We got one, of course, in Arkham Knight, which provided many pros and cons, but I will get to that in a later video. Edward Nigma, the Riddler, makes his return in Arkham City after suffering a humiliating defeat at the hands of Batman at the end of Arkham Asylum. He simply seeks vengeance and has upped his game in terms of Riddler challenges and puzzles, totaling 440 this time around, the most in any Arkham game to date. They are scattered all over the prison, and are far more elaborate than they were back at the Asylum. They force you to use a larger variety of gadgets too, sometimes multiple to solve, which makes them far more engaging. A portion of them include Easter egg type riddles again as well, that you must solve by locating the answer. These are always fun, though I find Arkham Asylums to still be the most memorable in all the games. This is my favorite incarnation of the Riddler from the franchise, in terms of his motivations, design, and puzzles. He kidnaps several medical staff that Batman must save in these death traps, that you basically unlock as you solve more and more riddles. Once you solve them all, you actually get your hands on them, the first time you ever did in the series. While I do enjoy the Riddler challenges in Arkham City more than any other installment, I will admit there were far too many of them. They went overboard in this one. It's probably why they lowered the number to 243 for Arkham Knight. Riddles are fun, but not when there are too much of them. Like I had mentioned earlier in this video, side missions are a thing in this game, and you can do them at your own pace. I think they provide a lot of variety if you feel the need to take a break from the main story. You can team up with Bane to destroy the remaining Titan containers left over after Arkham Asylum, confront Deadshot, who has been hired to kill not only Batman but Bruce Wayne himself, and even face off against the Mad Hatter, who gives Batman a hypnotic suggestion, making him believe he has found the cure, only to be subjected to an insane tea party and disorienting combat sequence instead. Azrael makes an appearance in this game as a mysterious watcher in the wings, observing your every move throughout the game, and you can even see him at the beginning when you first make your way into Arkham City. The events of his side mission seem very cryptic at first, but they do hint at his appearance in Arkham Knight. More on that later. My favorite is Identity Theft though, that has you, as Batman, investigate a series of horrific murders across Arkham City, in which the victims' faces have been removed, and the evidence more or less cleaned up. In the end, it turns out to be gifted surgeon turned serial killer Thomas Eliot, a childhood friend of Bruce Wayne's. He uses the pieces of the faces from his victims to recreate Bruce's, so he can destroy his former friend's life. This side mission is left open, technically speaking, because you never do get your hands on him. He escapes Arkham City, and Batman says he will go after him tomorrow. I just wish the payoff in Arkham Knight was much better. Again, we'll cover that in a later review. One thing about the side missions in Arkham City is that I find some of them to be very frustrating, but for all the wrong reasons. In the following games, Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight, side missions activate at certain points as you progress further into the story. Makes sense, and most of them do here in Arkham City. However, Cold Call Killer featuring Victor Zsasz is incredibly inconsistent. You have to pick up a series of ringing phones across the prison to trace the source of them back to Zsasz's hideout, so you can save a group of people he has taken hostage and intends to kill. While I think the mission is really unique, the frequency of calls seems to differ every time I play it. Sometimes they seem to happen in succession, one after the other, and I can beat this side mission pretty early on in the game. And other times they seem to never happen, and I go the entire duration of the main story without hearing any, or at least nowhere close to the amount needed to find Zsasz. Whenever I play this game and I hear a phone ring, I usually stop whatever it is I'm doing in order to reach it, knowing that I might not get another chance. While the nervousness you feel when this happens is probably Rocksteady's intent, Zsasz is toying with you and his victims after all, I still find it really annoying and frustrating when it didn't need to be. I don't know how they could have made a side mission involving ringing phones more scripted so as to make it more consistent in terms of when it pops up, but still, it can annoy the shit out of me, depending on what it is I'm doing when it happens. So let's talk about the boss battles. They are much better and more engaging than they were in Arkham Asylum. I already mentioned Solomon Grundy's inclusion in this game, and his is the first major one you do, focusing on the usage of quick-fire gadgets, specifically the explosive gel. Clayface is another one that uses quick-fire gadgets, the freeze grenade, and I love that it takes place in the old run-down Monarch Theater, reminiscent of the classic Universal Monsters, which of course Basil Karlo Clayface was partially based off of. Ra's al Ghul's encounter is one of my favorites in this series. I just love the intensity of it all, and on harder difficulties, it can be quite a challenge with those blades that come out of the ground as you're trying to get those damn electrical charge balls between the gaps. Fuck. But without question, the best boss battle in this game, and the entire Arkham series might I add, is Mr. Freeze. You really have to use every bit of cunning you can to defeat him, because though he can be weakened in a variety of ways, a certain strategy can only be used once as he affects the environment around him and eliminates it. Freezing railings, Batman's cape, floor grates, sending out drones to scan for you, preventing silent takedowns from behind his suit. You really have to keep moving and stick to the shadows with this one. Be Batman. Once again, on harder difficulties, Freeze can be a real challenge because his health goes down in much smaller chunks, and you basically have to use everything against him at least once. If you are an adept at certain strategies, then you might have trouble with this one. I mentioned earlier that I had some nitpicks with Mr. Freeze in this game, and I do. While I enjoy the direction they went with him, and his boss battle is incredible, it feels extremely forced and contrived within the narrative, which is a shame. Basically, once he manufactures the cure, he refuses to give it to Batman and locks it away in a safe, unless the Dark Knight agrees to find his wife Nora. He blackmails him. While I get it, and that part works, what I don't like is that after you beat the shit out of Freeze, he basically just gets up and brushes the dirt off like nothing happened, going back to helping Batman, and Batman even agrees to find Nora. It feels like such a weak way to have them fight, because it doesn't have any real purpose apart from a way to distract Batman long enough so the cure can be stolen by Harley Quinn, which of course is later stolen back by Talia al Ghul. Again, I love the Mr. Freeze fight, it's great, the best boss battle in the series, but it feels very forced and tacked on. I didn't feel like it had to happen, and was just there to waste time. The last element I want to get to before my conclusion is Catwoman and her playable sequences, missions. I think gameplay-wise, she adds some variety to everything going on in the story. You get a different perspective, and her playstyle is a fun change of pace, climbing on everything as opposed to gliding. Her combat is also more flashy and suggestive to say the least, and her gadgets can be quite entertaining, like tripping people with her bolus, or having goons hurt their feet and fall down from her caltrops. It's kind of funny. In terms of the missions themselves, the first and second are over way too fast and are essentially pointless to play, only giving you slivers of information and don't really add anything to the story, just setups and stuff like that get the ball rolling, but not necessary to know. The third one has you break into the Tiger-confiscated goods vault and retrieve some loot. It's fun, and the Predator area is very confined. You always have to keep in mind where you have left bodies. The final one takes place after the events of the main game, and has you confront Two-Face in the museum, that he has taken control over after Penguin's defeat. You fight your way through, but again, the Predator encounter with Two-Face that basically acts as his boss fight stinks. It should have been so much more than that, and featuring Batman instead of Catwoman. They attempt to establish a rivalry between the two throughout the game, with her stealing stuff from him, then Two-Face trying to drop her in acid, Catwoman scratching him, and then Harvey getting revenge by giving her loot away that he has stolen, but still, even with the back and forth, very lackluster when it's all said and done. Even with all the flaws and nitpicks I've mentioned, Batman Arkham City is still an incredible game, the very best in the superhero genre, at least as of right now, in my opinion. The fact that it manages to juggle so many characters and ideas, and yet still have a very strong and engaging narrative perplexes me, even to this day. Despite its release in 2011, and a couple more installments that have come out in the Arkham series since, Arkham City still holds the top spot in my book. The later games have shown us that just because you have more doesn't necessarily mean you have better, which we will soon see. This has been NerdGasm. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and bell icon to be notified of all future content I release, and I can't stress enough how helpful it is for me when you share them. It's much appreciated. I want to thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.
Well, if that's what's necessary, it's a good job that you've already taken them. All we need now is a finishing touch. A special new hat. Just for you.
Harley Quinn's Revenge is the story-based add-on for Batman Arkham City that was released originally in May of 2012, taking place after the events of the game. Its narrative follows Robin as he investigates the disappearance of Batman at the Arkham City steel mill, the Joker's old fortress before the Clown Prince of Crime's untimely death. As the title suggests, Harley Quinn is now the central antagonist and seeks revenge against Batman for killing Joker in her eyes, stealing the man of her dreams away. Harley is in mourning, and the alterations to her costume reflect that. Keep in mind, though, she is fueled by guilt deep down, because after she stole the last remaining cure vial from Mr. Freeze's lab during the events of the main game's story, Talia al Ghul had intercepted her and gotten it back. In many ways, Harley Quinn is partly responsible, or more accurately, she lost the chance to save her man. It's actually kind of sad, really, in a twisted way. The main selling point of this add-on was the ability to play as Robin for the first time in the series. While I'm not a huge fan of his costume here, it would become much better in Arkham Knight, I did find it extremely satisfying clubbing the shit out of thugs with his bow staff, using his zip kick to incapacitate foes, and even attaching snap flashes to them that can detonate, flooring all those around them. The snap flashes can be used on not only enemies, but the environment as well, though there is only one instance of that occurring, and it feels very artificial and contrived, unfortunately. As a side note, I also really enjoy small details like him drawing a Robin symbol when placing explosive gel, and his usage of shurikens as opposed to batarangs. Though playing as Robin is a big part of Harley Quinn's Revenge, you also do get to play as Batman again, through a flashback-type sequence, explaining how he got into the steel mill and how he was captured. When playing as Batman following the death of his archenemy the Joker, you can tell something is off with him, and that's how it should be. Kevin Conroy's voice acting has a little bit more grit and gloominess to it as well, more than usual, which adds to everything.
Quinn's thugs were talking about the missing cops. If they were here, they may have left some evidence that I can follow.
Give me the code.
Yeah, no problem. See, I'm doing what you wanted.
There was never any doubt in my mind.
That's all the codes. Next stop, Harley Quinn.
While there are a lot of interesting ideas present in Harley Quinn's Revenge, I feel it's very shallow, all things considered. It has a very weak narrative, which is something you'd expect from DLC, but I feel the other story add-ons we got later in the series, such as Cold Cold Heart and A Matter of Family, had a bit more meat on their bones, at least in my opinion. I'm not going to completely bash the writers here, because I couldn't do better myself, but unlike Arkham Asylum, which had Paul Dini as the sole writer, and the main game of Arkham City being written by Paul Dini in conjunction with Paul Crocker and game director Sefton Hill, Harley Quinn's Revenge didn't involve Dini whatsoever to my knowledge. I mean, I doubt he was involved, he couldn't have been, due to the state of the final product. It's not bad by any means, just lacking. And I know Paul Dini isn't the only person who can write Batman well. If I thought that, then I'd be crazy. But just look at how inconsistent the quality of this story add-on is compared to the main game, even compared to Arkham Asylum for that matter. I get that it's a lot shorter, and it's just DLC, but still. Dini wouldn't be involved in the writing of Arkham Knight either, and instead, it was Martin Lancaster, Ian Ball, and Sefton Hill. With Dini out, and with the shaky writing of Harley Quinn's Revenge, I feel it was a sign for things to come. Deep down, I knew Arkham Knight wouldn't be on the same level as Asylum and City in terms of story, even with all the eye candy and features it would have. But we'll get to all that next. While Batman Arkham series developer Rocksteady Studios were busy working on 2015's Batman Arkham Knight for the 8th generation of video game consoles after their highly acclaimed sequel to Arkham Asylum, Batman Arkham City, released in 2011, Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment felt they needed to bridge the gap between games, and decided to pass the baton over to Warner Bros. Games Montreal to develop a prequel for the series, using the same assets found in Arkham City. What we got was Batman Arkham Origins, which hit store shelves in October of 2013. Like I said, it acted as a prequel to the series, set before the events of Arkham Asylum. Though on its surface it retreads over many of the same elements and gameplay mechanics of its predecessor, it did bring a lot of new ideas to the table, and its story is just as strong, if not more so, than some of the other games in the franchise. Arkham Origins might not be perfect, but it's still a great Batman game. In my opinion, it's one of the most underrated superhero titles out there. Arkham Origins takes place 5 years before the events of Arkham Asylum, and during the second year of Batman's crime-fighting career. It's Christmas Eve, and Gotham crime lord Roman Sionis, Black Mask, has put a bounty on Batman's head for $50 million. He has gathered 8 of the world's deadliest assassins to compete for it, and among those killers is the marksman Deadshot, the pyromaniac Firefly, the contortionist Copperhead, the martial artist Lady Shiva, the powerhouse Bane, the monstrous Killer Croc, the electrifying Electrocutioner, and the mercenary Deathstroke. On paper, this is a great way to kick things off, and right from the get-go, you're completely invested in this storyline, and what this game has to offer. Unfortunately, Arkham Origins suffers due to one fatal mistake. Despite the Joker dying at the end of Batman Arkham City, Warner Bros. Montreal just couldn't let him go. I know this is a prequel, and the character would be alive, but on this night, Christmas Eve, Batman has his first encounter with the Joker, and to be honest, for the most part, it's pretty well executed. The story contrasts the orderly and serious tone of Batman's way of thinking and crime fighting with the chaotic and extreme viewpoint of the Joker. It works really well, and we get a sense that both of them have completely altered the life of the other, almost in an instant. Seeing the beginnings of this love-hate relationship is interesting, and one of the strongest aspects this game has going for it. Batman and Joker are in many ways the same, two sides of the same coin. However, it does come at a cost. The compelling idea of a $50 million bounty on the Dark Knight's head is basically forgotten by the game's end, in favor of the Batman-Joker story. To make matters even worse, many of the supervillains featured in the game are thrown on the back burner, with the Joker taking most of the spotlight. Characters like Shiva, Deadshot, and Black Mask are confined to short, anticlimactic, and unimpressive side missions. Black Mask, who was the main reason I picked up this game in the first place, was the most disappointing because in my eyes, he should have been the game's primary antagonist. It's what it all seemed to be aiming towards at the beginning. Instead, it is revealed that Black Mask had been the Joker the entire time, and the real Roman Sionis was simply kidnapped by him before later escaping, which results in the aforementioned side mission. The fact that they set up one of Batman's rogues and turn him into another shows you how little faith they had in the strength and potential of the Black Mask character. He's not one of Batman's strongest villains by any means, but when done right, he can be quite compelling. Here it's a bit of a joke, and I sometimes hate how Warner Bros. Favors the Joker and puts him in everything. Yes, he's a great villain, but too much of anything can become sickening after a while. Again, the strong narrative explaining the origins of the Batman-Joker relationship is good. It gives the Joker a reason to be in this game, but in terms of explaining how Batman and the Joker are soulmates in many ways, that's honestly something done better in Arkham Knight than it is in Arkham Origins. It's much more effective in the final moments of that game than it is in the entirety of this one. In Arkham Origins, Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill were replaced as Batman and the Joker respectively, seeing as this is a prequel story, and our new voice actors are Roger Craig Smith playing the Dark Knight and Troy Baker playing the Clown Prince of Crime. Roger Craig Smith does a great job breathing life into his own version of Batman. which seems to take elements from both Kevin Conroy's from the previous 2 Batman games, as well as Christian Bale's from the Dark Knight trilogy of films. Despite taking inspiration from the 2, Roger Craig Smith still manages to bring a level of originality to it, which is admirable, and makes the whole gameplay experience new and interesting in that sense. Everyone tends to think Troy Baker is an amazing Joker, and I'd have to say I don't really believe that. He doesn't portray his own version of the character, and instead, simply copies the one done by Mark Hamill, which is unfortunate. Is it bad? Of course not, but I would have much rather preferred that he come up with his own interpretation and not just impersonate another, regardless of whether or not this is a prequel set within the same Arkham universe. Is it a good impersonation? Yes. But is Troy Baker a good Joker? Not really. He's a good Mark Hamill Joker. Because Arkham Origins' depiction of this character was simply an impersonation, it was a bit of a wasted opportunity in my opinion. Quite disappointing. Though Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill are absent from this game, Warner Bros. Montreal was able to bring in the character of Detective Harvey Bullock, who had yet to debut in the Arkham franchise, with Robert Costanzo reprising his role from Batman the Animated Series. He doesn't factor into the story in any way, and is sort of just there, but his inclusion was welcoming. I thought it was cool.
Where'd he go? Huh? The Bat. The partner. My partner? Who else would jump off a building to save your sorry ass? You know, officer.
I was wondering the same thing myself.
Like I mentioned at the start of this video, Arkham Origins was created using assets from Arkham City, the quickest and cheapest way to make a bridging game within a series. The open world of Gotham consists of the reused sections of Park Row, the Bowery, Wonder Tower, and Amusement Mile from Arkham City, just with new textures and skins over top. This time around though, the game world is almost twice as big as the one found in Arkham City, with the original map from that game making up North Gotham, and the inclusion of a newer and glitzier South Gotham added to the mix, connected by a massive bridge. South Gotham consists of Coventry, Burnley, and my personal favorite, the Diamond District, which is full of high-rise buildings, flashy lights, and neon colors. It's like I'm in Batman Forever. Arkham Origins Gotham is supposedly twice as big as Arkham City's, but I think that's debatable. I think City has more indoor sequences than Origins does, and even if it doesn't, the level of detail in Arkham City far surpasses the level of detail found in Arkham Origins. If the environment's graphics aren't as good, of course you can pack more into this game. That's a no-brainer. Despite the Gotham in Arkham Origins being bigger, it is one of the most eerie and lifeless open worlds I have ever seen in a video game, and I think the Christmas Eve motif doesn't do it any favors. Every Arkham game released so far has had a game world devoid of any and all civilian life. But, unlike Arkham City and Arkham Knight, that have legitimate reasons behind their absence that you never think twice about, here it's kind of ridiculous. The beginning of the game mentions that there has been a severe weather warning, and that Gotham citizens have been advised to stay indoors. That's cool and all, but it's not like a citywide evacuation or anything. Don't you think there would be a few strays out there, getting last-minute Christmas shopping done, or hell, driving home to be with their families for Christmas? Some people work on Christmas Eve, and I don't think Gotham would be an exception. All in all, it's a pretty weak explanation. I did enjoy the inclusion of the Batcave though, that you could travel to at any time to train in combat challenges in order to hone your skills and get a few extra experience points you could use to upgrade your arsenal. You could also talk to Alfred and discuss various events that have transpired as you play, and even look at some cool Easter eggs like a section of the prototype Batmobile later featured in Arkham Asylum, the line launcher, and even a crime board showing you various trails Batman has been following, like Calendar Man and the mysterious Red Hood. Having the Batcave explorable here was something I had wanted in the Arkham games since day one, and I was happy Warner Bros. Montreal delivered on it. Much like the game environment, the combat system is stripped right out of Arkham City with a few minor deviations. Seeing as this game takes place earlier in Batman's crime-fighting career, a couple of the animations are more sluggish-like, with some of the ground takedowns, for example, that make Batman seem a bit more inexperienced than in previous games. You still have your cape stuns, quick-fire batarangs, and explosive gel, takedowns, beatdowns, and bat-swarm abilities. All that hasn't changed. But there are some cool new additions like the martial artist enemy type that can counter your strikes, counter your counters, and sometimes needs to be blocked with a double button press, which can get tricky if you're surrounded by them. There are also brutes that take multiple strikes to defeat, and even armored brutes that require a takedown first before a beatdown. Unfortunately, once you acquire the shock gloves from the electrocutioner about halfway through the game, the combat in Arkham Origins becomes broken. Why? Because once these babies are fully upgraded, all it takes is a few takedowns to charge them up, and once activated you can punch through shields, armor, tasers, everything. It essentially becomes a win button, and eliminates any and all strategy. I'd like to say that you could just not use them, but that's easier said than done. Once the game prompts you to activate them, it can be hard to resist, like a drug addiction. You want Batman to go God of War mode on all their asses. Despite the added-in brutes, martial artists, and other enemy types from previous games, the combat system is very unbalanced due to the shock gloves. Apparently, early on in the game's development, there was going to be a snowstorm feature which would cause complete whiteouts during some combat encounters, thus limiting the player's visibility. Sadly, it was removed because it caused the game to slow down too much. If it would have been added in, it may have helped balance the power of the shock gloves a little bit more. Though, maybe the shock gloves were a quick last-minute replacement for the whiteout system, so who knows. The Predator encounters aren't much better because you get another gadget from Deathstroke that is new to the series called the Remote Claw, and this one you receive much earlier in the game. Much like the shock gloves, it can be a lot of fun at first, shooting cables between vantage points to walk along them and perform stealth takedowns from above. You can also tether two enemies together, which stuns them, allowing you to close in for a finishing strike. Once the Remote Claw is fully upgraded though with heavy real ammo, you can instantly incapacitate 3 enemies in any Predator room by simply firing the Remote Claw at them, which hurls them up towards the nearest vantage point. Most times you don't even have to move all that much, so basically strike 3 off any Predator encounter automatically. For a game that's supposed to take place early in Batman's crime-fighting career, having him a little wet around the ears, he seems to be the most overpowered in Arkham Origins compared to all the other installments, which doesn't make much sense. Yeah, gamers want more features every time there is a new game released, I get that, but here, it didn't feel like many of the additions were necessary. They felt lazy and obviously there wasn't that much thought put into them. Okay, so that's enough on the gameplay. Let's talk more about the side missions and cast of characters featured in this game. We already know about the Joker and his hijacking of Arkham Origins' story. That wasn't the most ideal. But many of the lesser-known villains are given their dues, like Firefly and Copperhead for instance, and that's nice to see. This depiction of Bane is one of the best in my opinion too, and gives The Dark Knight Rises a run for its money. He even goes to Wayne Manor, breaks into the Batcave, and seemingly kills Alfred. Brutal stuff. Mad Hatter was a character I'm glad made his return after debuting in Arkham City, and I think his side mission here was more enjoyable than his first. You go to save a girl named Alice who has been kidnapped by him, and after being drugged in the hopes of Mad Hatter obtaining your cowl, you make your way through his twisted version of Wonderland. You battle goons with rabbit masks, break through giant playing cards, and climb to the top of a clock tower. It's one of the most visually stimulating parts of the game, that's for sure. One of my favorite Batman villains, the criminally underrated Anarchy, causes some ruckus in this game too. It's a travesty how underused he is, however, appearing right after you finish at the Penguin's docked final offer ocean liner, and makes his exit shortly after. His side mission involves stopping 3 bombs planted throughout the city, and then a final confrontation with him at the courthouse, but it can all be finished within a very short time span, which undermines his threat level in my opinion. Though Anarchy has little time awarded to him, they do manage to pack in as much philosophical ideology as they can related to anarchism. He seeks to work with Batman at first, feeling they can fix Gotham together, but Batman refuses, and the misguided naive Anarchy turns on him. Other antagonists you face are members of the GCPD themselves, which is an interesting direction for this game to take, and helps it stand out from the other Arkham installments, showing the tension and uneasy relationship between the independent vigilante that is Batman and the city's trusted police officers was a refreshing idea. Both mentalities are justified and clash with another at various points throughout the game. We even get introduced to a young Barbara Gordon who would later become Batgirl and then Oracle in the series, who helps him locate the database, and James Gordon's plan is to capture the Batman as quick as possible so the assassin's bounty doesn't put innocent lives in danger. We have all three characterizations effectively displayed here and understand why each of them are doing what they do. On top of that, we have an officer named Brandon who is corrupt and has infected the majority of the department with his greedy and selfish ways. Behind Gordon's back, he assembles a team to track down Batman and kill him, so they can take the $50 million themselves and retire early, as he puts it. The tension between Batman, James Gordon, and the rest of the GCPD is one of the stronger elements of Arkham Origins' story. Gordon's character is much more fleshed out in this game than in any of the others, where he seems to just be in the background. I enjoy the inclusion of the Brandon character as well, but I feel he should have played a larger role in the narrative. He only pops up a few times, and they aren't that important in the grander scheme of things. Much like the other Arkham games, Arkham Origins implements the Riddler, or in this case Edward Nashton, known as Enigma. He plans on collecting personal information from the citizens of Gotham and use it as blackmail against them, for ransom, robbery, you name it. Honestly, it's a logical direction for this character early on in his criminal career. I just wish it had been done more effectively. The Enigma Challenges in Arkham Origins consist of collecting data packs that replace the Riddler trophies in Arkham Asylum and City, destroying communication relays which replace the security cameras, and hacking relay towers so you can fast travel to various points throughout the city with your Batwing. Once they are all completed, you can hack into Enigma's hideout and collect the very first Riddler trophy, signifying his transformation into the iconic supervillain, which is cool. However, the challenges here are extremely repetitive and tedious. They get old really quick. Unlike Arkham City and even Arkham Asylum that have a combination of riddles you need to scan in the environment and trophies you need to collect, here it's just collecting, nothing more, nothing less. I know he isn't the Riddler yet, so riddles would technically be out of the question, but that means there isn't enough variety with what you're doing, and the game doesn't really promote the idea of exploring the environment, allowing you to find Easter eggs, which eliminates a lot of the fun. On top of that, the gadget puzzles you solve in order to collect the data packs are lazy. Many of them repeat several times throughout the city, and apart from the rare one which poses somewhat of a challenge, the majority are simple and don't use any effort to figure out. When you have to backtrack to previous parts of the game to collect missed ones, it isn't as rewarding as the other games because you know you could have easily acquired it before. It's all just annoying busy work. I was not a fan. My most hated part of all of this, though, was the wooden plank barriers. In Arkham City, you could smash them by gliding into them or punching them, but here, you have to use explosive gel, which can get really frustrating for people who are very familiar with the series like myself. It's annoying to have to constantly switch to the explosive gel gadget and spray some down, when all you should have to do is punch it once. It makes collecting everything take longer, and is a quick way for the game developers to pad everything out. If they didn't want me to instinctively try to punch it and frustrate myself, then make the wall look like all the other walls that need explosive gel. Why trick me like that? Fucking assholes. Okay, so going back to another thing I genuinely enjoy about Batman Arkham Origins, we have the detective aspect and crime scenes. I think this game shifts focus onto this element of Batman more so than all the rest, which is one of its more admirable qualities. At several points throughout the story, you need to find evidence, piece together clues, and analyze crime scenes in order to advance. The only downside is that it uses the mechanic we would be introduced to in the following game, Arkham Knight, which at the time we didn't know about, and in Arkham Origins it has been watered down. You do locate evidence in the crime scenes by fast-forwarding or rewinding the events that transpired, but once you reach the correct point on the timeline, the game points out what you need to find with a bright red triangle, defeating the purpose of doing all of it in the first place. Despite this flaw, I still think the game puts in more of an effort to show you the detective side of Batman's character. There are even crime scenes that activate all over the city as sort of side missions that get you to solve each murder and track down and interrogate the one responsible. It makes you really feel like the Dark Knight, it's something he would do. The final murder even shares similarities with the death of Batman's parents, taking place in Crime Alley, which makes it even more personal.
What do you think you're doing? Do you know who I am?
I know exactly who you are. You didn't do it for money. You didn't even do it for love.
You're choking me. I can't breathe.
Not out of jealousy, not out of anger. You did it because you're a small, selfish, malicious...
Sir, is everything all right? Your vital signs are rather erratic.
What the hell's wrong with you?
There are also plaques you can find all over the city on some of Gotham's oldest landmarks that unlock pieces of Cyrus Pinckney's journal, the architect who designed and constructed many of the landmarks found within Gotham during the 1800s. It's a cool way of diving into the rich history of the city, and as you complete the journal and collect all the pages, you slowly learn of the dark origins of Gotham, the betrayal amongst its founders, and even solve the murder of Cyrus Pinckney himself, Gotham's oldest cold case. It makes you feel like a true detective, because the game doesn't tell you where these plaques are in any way, aside from glowing blue and detective vision, and the entire side mission isn't on the page with the other side missions, it's completely missable. You just have to know the layout of the city and become familiar with the locations of the oldest buildings, typically ones featured in Arkham City. It's not a spectacular addition to the game by any means, but like I said, it adds to the whole feeling of being a detective, which is much appreciated. You even end up in Cyrus Pinckney's crypt, and it's honestly a bit spooky. Now I have yet to talk about the boss battles in this game, and let me tell you, collectively they are some of the best in the franchise. They have a nice variety to them and target different gameplay combinations, more so than previous games in my opinion. One of the best is Deathstroke's from early in the story, and it's one of the most physical encounters Batman has had in the entire series. There are so many strikes and blocks going on, getting harder and harder as the fight continues, which makes for an intense sequence. With that said, it has nothing on the Mr. Freeze battle in Arkham City, which is still the pinnacle achievement of the series boss-wise. I also find the fight with Deathstroke to be less and less epic with each new playthrough, because the animations, though awesome, do repeat themselves over and over again. It's also kind of disappointing compared to what we saw in some of the early trailers for the game. I think this battle should have taken place outside, or at the very least, much later in the game. Once Deathstroke is beaten, he kind of disappears from the story. Another great boss battle in Arkham Origins is the one with Copperhead, which has you poisoned seeing duplicates of her. It takes several elements from the Ra's al Ghul fight from Arkham City, but I do still enjoy it, and it's definitely one of the more challenging boss battles, especially on harder difficulties. The Firefly encounter on Gotham's Pioneer Bridge, near the end of the game, is very satisfying too. It's paced out in several sections, mixing gameplay and cinematics, and makes use of Batman's quick-fire grapnel gun and glue grenades, which is cool. The rooftop encounter with Bane is also a highlight, far surpassing the boss fight in Arkham Asylum. This one has a level of intensity the original game could only dream of, and takes inspiration from the Nightfall story arc. However, the later battle with him at Blackgate, where you are given unlimited charge on the shock gloves, while epic and challenging, is sort of underwhelming because you're too overpowered. And then, the sequence with the TN1 Bane at the end is an anticlimactic game of cat and mouse with a dumb explanation as to why he is the way he is in Arkham Asylum. We'll get to that in a bit, just you wait. Up until now, I have more or less pulled a lot of my punches with Arkham Origins, because despite its flaws, it's still a very engaging and enjoyable Batman experience. With that said, there is something that has held this game down from being great when it was released, and unfortunately still rears its ugly head today. There are countless bugs and glitches that range from minor to game-breaking, which usually result in me having to reset the console at least once each time I play through the story, due to the game freezing or the countless times I have to restart a checkpoint because I'm unable to interrogate someone, annoying stuff like that. The fast travel option, which allows you to bypass the long and repetitive bridge in the middle of the map, is a nice feature, but even that needs to be used sporadically because sometimes the audio for the cutscene will cut out and occasionally it will just show the Batwing and refuse to load, forcing me to reset the game again too. Usually, I don't really care about this sort of thing in games, it happens. They consist of a lot of elements and glitches are bound to occur from time to time, especially if you are playing it hours on end and stressing the console, causing it to heat up and stuff like that. but here, it's a bit ridiculous and happens far too frequently. When I have to restart the game or reset my console several times just to play it casually whenever I find the time to play, it can become a pain. I don't have these problems with the other Arkham titles that run like water. Arkham Origins has a lot of frame rate issues too, and sometimes it's so incredibly slow that it ruins the flow of gliding or combat, causing you to fall or get hit, which is really frustrating. I hate when you are punished because of a game's performance, and not because of your skill level. It's unfair. I think the biggest culprit of all this, though, was the fact that Arkham Origins featured a pointless multiplayer mode. I myself am not a fan of online multiplayer because I think it embodies the very worst aspect of the video game industry, how short the lifespans are for games as well as the consoles. Once an online server gets shut down, a game that relies heavily on online modes, some even have it make up their entire games, now become nothing more than paperweights. Even if you buy a digital copy of a game, all the time that went into playing it and money spent on DLC becomes a waste, not to mention that game developers have the ability to alter a game with a simple patch. Who's to say that what you bought will stay that way? It's not up to you. I prefer games that offer single-player experiences and ones that I know I can pop in and play years down the road. Much like movies that I enjoy watching decades after they are released, I want my games to reflect that too. If the team at Warner Bros. Montreal focused all their energy on Arkham Origins' single-player experience instead of its multiplayer, then maybe a lot of these bugs and glitches would have been addressed. They would have had the time and manpower for it. They spent all those resources making a multiplayer mode. For what? A few years of fun? Something that has since been closed down and will certainly become a forgotten relic of the past? It's pointless. The multiplayer wasn't even that fun, and the Predator gameplay and third-person shooting didn't mesh with each other that well. This type of game, these Batman games, don't work like this. Some people have fond memories of it, but I thought it was shit, to be honest. Anyways, let's wrap this up. Batman Arkham Origins may be the black sheep of the Arkham franchise, but in no way is it necessarily a bad game. I think its strongest elements are those discussing the relationship between Batman and the Joker, Bruce Wayne and Alfred, and the Dark Knight's vigilantism compared to the law and order of the Gotham City Police Department. Its focus on Batman's detective skills was something the other games in the series were lacking at the time, and I enjoyed the way you could solve crimes and catch those responsible despite its simplistic nature. Because Arkham Origins' story focuses on the early days of Batman's crime-fighting career and his introduction to many of the supervillains he would face here on out through the $50 million bounty placed on his head, I find it to be a lot more personal than the stories featured in the other games that favor larger threats, targeting all of Gotham or sometimes the rest of the world. Here, it's all directly targeted at Batman, for the most part, and it's up to him to stop them and learn from his own weaknesses and past mistakes. I don't think it's the best storyline in the Arkham series, but it's definitely up there when you take all of that into account. I find a lot of the inconsistencies with the other Arkham games and how Arkham Origins sets up the events of Arkham Asylum to be somewhat lazy, like how Bane's memory is erased due to the instability of his TN1 drug, the inclusion of the stupid glue grenade that replaces Mr. Freeze's ice grenade from Arkham City, just so they could copy that gameplay feature. Man, I hate this fucking thing. So dumb. That Batman is able to grapnel boost, despite that gadget being a prototype in Arkham City, and it wouldn't exist at this point in time, and the fact that Batman simply refused to use the remote claw and shock gloves again, despite their overpowered nature. Why wouldn't you bring those with you in future battles? I can see the remote claw being the early inspiration for the line launcher, but still, build the shock gloves into every Batsuit from here on out if they worked so well. Doesn't that make sense? From what I've heard, Warner Bros. Games Montreal wasn't communicating that well with Rocksteady during this game's development, so I guess inconsistencies were bound to happen. They weren't really on the same page with everything, and it's kind of a shame, really. Yeah, Arkham Origins still has a lot of bugs, glitches, and performance issues, but it isn't enough for me to completely bury it. Arkham Origins is still an Arkham game through and through, and any fan of the series can find something to love about it, I guarantee it. There have been rumors and fan requests about this game getting a remaster on the current generation of consoles, but honestly, I know why it wasn't featured in the 2016 Return to Arkham re-release. Not only was this an Arkham game not made by Rocksteady that doesn't flow very well into the continuity of their games, but the developer Virtuous would have had a lot of work on their hands. Not only would they have to remaster the graphics, but fix all the performance issues the previous developer threw under the rug. Yeah, it was disappointing that Arkham Origins never got the polish it needed, but at the same time, can you blame them? It probably would have cost Warner Brothers more money than usual. It'd have to be completely restructured, and I don't know how well Origins sold to begin with. Would it even be worth it in the end? I don't know. Cold Cold Heart is the story add-on for Batman Arkham Origins, set after the main game's narrative and is essentially a shot-for-shot remake of the episode Heart of Ice from Batman the Animated Series. GothCorp industrialist Ferris Boyle wins the Wayne Foundation Humanitarian of the Year award at a New Year's Eve party held at Wayne Manor. He gets kidnapped by a heavily armored figure possessing a freeze gun, and it's up to Batman to figure out who he is and why he has taken Boyle. Your pursuits lead to a crime scene that reveals the tragic events that led to the transformation of cryo-scientist Victor Freeze into the villain Mr. Freeze, and the man responsible, Ferris Boyle, who double-crossed Freeze, hoping to use his cryogenic technology to make weapons. As Batman, you bring justice to Freeze in the end, and Boyle faces charges for his inhumane actions.
Take a seat, humanitarian.
Cryogenic containment restored.
I'm sorry, Victor. I can't give you peace, but I can give you justice.
Though Batman Arkham Origins has its fair share of pros and cons and is definitely the black sheep of the main Arkham series, at least as of right now, I'm a huge fan of this DLC, and enjoy it thoroughly. It doesn't add anything new to the Heart of Ice story, and if you've seen the award-winning episode from Batman the Animated Series, then don't expect Cold Cold Heart to be on par with it, because it's not, far from it. It plays it relatively safe in that regard, but I do think it adapts it strong enough and competently enough that it keeps you invested and you actually care about the characters. Mr. Freeze is a very tragic and sympathetic villain, and you feel bad for what happened to him here. Everything that had meaning in his life is gone. Maurice LaMarche returns to voice him following Arkham City, and he is brilliant as always.
You've endangered lives all over this city. Nora would never have wanted this.
No. What she wants is to live a long life in the warmth of the sun. Her hand in mine. And because of him, she'll only feel the icy touch of a man whose emotions run as cold as the blood in his veins.
Much like Harley Quinn's revenge from Arkham City, Cold Cold Heart takes place within a zoned-off area of Gotham, the Coventry and Diamond districts found on the South Island of the city. I think choosing these two was the best choice. The Diamond district is by far the most colorful and vibrant in the entire game. It has the most personality and scale. They also decided to brighten up the sky a little bit. It's looking very orange, and is reminiscent of the finale of 1997's Batman and Robin. You tell me if that's a good or bad thing. The new gameplay elements brought into Cold Cold Heart may be somewhat insignificant all things considered, but I do find them fun. Early on in the story, Batman realizes that some of the environments he finds himself in are far too cold for his regular Batsuit to handle, and has Alfred upgrade him with the prototype XE suit, which stands for Extreme Environment. This thing manages to be both awesome and stupid at the same time. On one hand, it allows you to heat up batarangs that you can use to knock down icicles onto foes, thaw out civilians that have been frozen by Freeze's goons, break through ice barriers with ease using built-in thermal gloves, and keeps Batman warm and cozy inside like a marshmallow over fire. But that's the thing, isn't it? Batman has become a marshmallow. It looks like he's made less stops at the gym and more at Dunkin' Donuts. The DLC makes it clear that it is insulated with some form of honeycomb structure that maintains heat, but doesn't increase weight. I don't buy it. Even if the weight was the same as the other Batsuit, the XE suit's bulky design would make fighting, even gliding, more difficult. It has a purpose within the narrative, but realistically, it wouldn't be that functional if you really think about it. I have to admit though, having a special Batsuit to combat certain obstacles is a cool idea, and something Batman toys did all the time, as well as the later 90s films, and even 2017's Justice League. I love when this type of thing is done with the character, and I'd love to see more of it in mainstream media, please. The final boss fight with Mr. Freeze is challenging, at least the intro part where you have to time it right to avoid his goons and Freeze's attention while overloading those cryo tanks. But compared to the one found in Arkham City, this one is quite disappointing. The amount of takedown variations you can do are limited to tightrope takedowns, silent takedowns, and wall takedowns. That's basically it. You can even break a few icicles over him that take off chunks of his health. In fact, you can beat him by just using the icicles if you wanted to. Sadly, there is nothing preventing you from doing it. Freeze just takes it up the ass like a bitch.
You will not. We made a deal. Now get in here and find the Batman. Where are you? Your technical. Where are you? You will not stop.
Despite all these nitpicks and shots I've taken at it, I still enjoy Cold Cold Heart. It's my favorite story add-on the Arkham franchise has produced up until this point. Though its narrative borrows heavily from Heart of Ice, and doesn't really add much of anything new in return, it's okay, because the very nature of the story is compelling, and having it adapted into the Arkhamverse was welcomed. I'm glad Mr. Freeze got a chance to shine in such a big way like this. There was a lot more to explore with him, and Cold Cold Heart, at least in my opinion, was satisfying in that regard. I do wish there was more to do after the DLC's story is over though, apart from those quick, useless anarchy riots that lead nowhere. That's if you didn't beat them during the main story, that is. You do get quick-fire thermal batarangs after stopping all the riots and disabling the bomb, but that's it. Anarchy doesn't even make a physical appearance, so why include it? Actually, fun fact, the final Anarchy challenge was something shown to us during the Arkham Origins E3 demo that was never in the final game. Same goes for that bank heist. Warner Bros. Montreal just threw these into the DLC because a few people noticed they were absent from the main game. You can never trust those E3 demos. They're full of shit and all done up. Batman Arkham Knight was probably the most anticipated video game in my entire life, and I doubt any will reach that same level of hype ever again. Coming off of Arkham City, the greatest superhero game of all time in my opinion, I couldn't have been more stoked for its follow-up, Rocksteady's follow-up, Batman Arkham Knight. I already explained in my review of Harley Quinn's Revenge that the absence of Paul Dini in the writer's chair with this one was a bit of a red flag with me. I knew it wouldn't be as good as the previous two installments from a writing standpoint, or at least had very little faith in it in that regard. The Joker was dead, Batman's greatest adversary, and the void would be damn near impossible to fill, regardless of whatever villains you decided to throw into it. Being that Arkham Knight was going to be on the next generation of consoles, and upped the ante in terms of content, gameplay features, and overall eye candy, I also felt that this was a sign of caution, a form of distraction to pad out its other weaknesses. Now I want to make it perfectly clear, see this as a disclaimer of sorts. I love Arkham Knight, it's my second favorite game in the series. While I don't necessarily admire every choice made in it, every aspect from top to bottom, I do still think it's a great game, and easily towers head and shoulders above countless other superhero titles in the medium. I have my issues with it, which I will get to of course, but I do believe a lot of people bash this game unfairly for a multitude of reasons. Again, I will get to them. I believe there is a misunderstanding with Arkham Knight and what it was trying to accomplish. Did it stick its landing in each and every instance? No. Was it disappointing at times? Yes and maybe, depending on who you ask. But it still deserves praise from not only comic book fans and Batman fans, but the gaming community in general. It's still one of the most impressive titles of the 8th generation, at least in my opinion, and if there's one thing it does and does well, it makes you feel like Batman. You become the Batman. Arkham Knight follows Batman as he takes on the Scarecrow, returning after his apparent death at the hands of Killer Croc in Arkham Asylum, though Arkham City features an Easter egg that reveals he had survived and has been planning a new horrifying scheme in the years since. On Halloween, Scarecrow threatens to unleash his new fear toxin across Gotham, which causes a citywide evacuation. Batman tracks him to Ace Chemicals, where he has been holed up manufacturing his scary Kool-Aid, and later learns of a device known as the Cloudburst, which Scarecrow plans on using to disperse his toxin. Scarecrow unites all the remaining villains in Gotham and partners with a new figure known as the Arkham Knight, who leads an army of militia forces and drone tanks to finally kill Batman once and for all. The Arkham Knight's forces pressure the Caped Crusader into bringing in his big guns, the Batmobile, which is drivable for the first time in the series after years of fans requesting it. With the help of his Bat Tank, he faces off against the combined might of Scarecrow and the Arkham Knight in the hopes of saving the city. First and foremost, let's talk about Scarecrow. Many of you know by now that Mysterio from Spider-Man is my favorite villain in all of comics, but the Scarecrow has always been a close second, and as a die-hard Scarecrow fan, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that this is my favorite version of him in all of media. From a design standpoint, a performance standpoint, he's simply unforgettable. John Noble, of Fringe and Lord of the Rings fame, voices Scarecrow in this game, and he is outstanding in the role. His voice is soft, soothing, yet at the same time creepy and unsettling. He gets under your skin and gives you goosebumps whenever he is on screen.
Your fears got the better of you, I see. How fitting that I will win, and Batman's life will be over. Not because of what I have done to your precious city, but because you are scared of what I will do to your friends, your family. They are your weakness, hiding just below the surface. I'm sure that you're scared of what will happen when I tear that mask from your face. What will we find? Your true identity? Or proof that without your mask, you are nothing, impotent, powerless, afraid?
I might have some issues with Arkham Knight as a game, but if there is one thing Rocksteady nailed with it, it's the Scarecrow. He is a film-quality villain in terms of on-screen presence, and easily the biggest threat Batman has faced in the Arkham franchise up until this point. His plan affects the entire city of Gotham, which other ones in the past did too, but here, you feel the immense scale of it in ways the other villains just didn't reach. The Scarecrow in Arkham Knight is one of the most competently written villains I've seen in the superhero genre. If you really think about it, he never makes any dumb or questionable decisions. When he says he's going to do something, he does it. Simple as that. Scarecrow actually succeeds with his plan and covers the city with his fear toxin that you as Batman must traverse through, despite the extreme psychological danger it presents. With the help of Poison Ivy, who sacrifices herself, you manage to clean up the gas, but that initial detonation of the Cloudburst, it was something I didn't see coming. Scarecrow has some serious balls. In many ways, Crane accomplishes what he set out to do, to destroy the Batman by unmasking him on live television. He even manages to attack several of Batman's allies throughout the game too, like Barbara Gordon and Robin. Again, Scarecrow is very well written here, a competent villain and a legitimate threat to the hero. The only other antagonist in the series that comes close in my opinion is Bane from Batman Arkham Origins. Seeing as he found out Batman's true identity, breaks into the Batcave and nearly kills Alfred. But even he falls short due to his usage of TN1 for no logical reason, and the idiotic writing that had it destroy his brain's memory centers so everything could fall into place with the events of Arkham Asylum and City. The character had the legs cut out from under it in many ways. Anywho, the design of Scarecrow in Arkham Knight is one of the character's biggest strengths because it has a purpose, an explanation. They didn't make him look scarier just for the hell of it. After Killer Croc grabbed him and took him under the water during the events of Arkham Asylum, you presumed he was dead. Jonathan Crane's body was broken and destroyed. He would have had to repair it. The string holding his jaw together, the knee brace on one side, his clouded eyes similar to cataracts, he was essentially a walking corpse. The Scarecrow's design in Arkham Knight makes his one in Arkham Asylum look like a cute teddy bear by comparison. The extreme alteration to his design also reminds me of the one the character went through in Batman the Animated Series, starting off very cliché, and then becoming darker and darker as the series progressed.
You don't scare me.
Shh. It's okay to be afraid.
On top of the main story where you take on the Scarecrow and Arkham Knight, there are countless side missions you can do at any given time, and with the added-in ones from the Season of Infamy DLC, this game is padded out quite nicely at this point. Notable ones I really enjoy include City on Fire, which have you chase down Firefly, who's trying to burn down all of Gotham's fire stations. Wonderland, which has you rescue several GCPD officers kidnapped by the Mad Hatter, with the final battle taking place within the pages of a storybook, summarizing the events of the series, minus Arkham Origins of course. Creature of the Night features Man-Bat, and no matter how many times I play this game, he still scares the shit out of me. You've got In From the Cold with Mr. Freeze, which ends in an emotionally satisfying way. It's quite beautiful really, kudos to the writers. Beneath the Surface with a downright terrifying version of Killer Croc, further mutated due to the extreme physical trauma administered to him, and Lamb to the Slaughter with the ever-delusional Deacon Blackfire. My personal favorite is The Perfect Crime, which has Batman investigate a series of bodies he finds all across Gotham, with cryptic words written near them, opera music playing, and unique physical imperfections that you must find to identify them. You come to learn that the man responsible for killing them is Laszlo Valentin, Professor Pig. He's a very new character compared to many other Batman rogues, only debuting in comics in 2007, which is why prior to playing this game, I didn't even know he existed, and why would I? Most of the Batman stuff I look at is older than that. Though the vast majority of the side missions featured in Arkham Knight are enjoyable and do their respective villains justice, some of them do not. Two-Faced Bandit with Two-Face is not much better than the Catwoman Predator sequence at the end of Arkham City. Following City, I was really hoping Two-Face would be the one to fill the void left by the Joker because in many ways, he's the second best Batman villain. But sadly, what we got here is another Predator encounter, and you just wipe the floor with one of Batman's greatest adversaries. Sometimes I freeze him in place. He lasts longer that way. Another one is Friend in Need, where an imposter Bruce Wayne takes Lucius Fox hostage at Wayne Tower, and Batman must go and rescue him. This imposter is of course Thomas Eliot, Hush, in what I found to be a disappointing conclusion to an arc that was set up in Arkham City. Mind you, it's not terrible by any means, just a little unsatisfactory, all things considered. The Riddler makes an appearance in this game yet again, and I don't really know what else to say about him. His riddles can be fun in spurts, and finding the Easter eggs are cool, not to mention there were much less in this game than Arkham City, which was appreciated, but I think by this point in the series, he kind of overstayed his welcome with me. I think if they ever make another Arkham game, try to just incorporate the Riddler and his death traps into the story in some way. Have him be a recurring villain that keeps popping up over and over again, getting in your way. I'm kind of sick of his Riddler trophies. They can still be fun, and I enjoyed searching for them in this game, but it's starting to get a little stale. I don't know how much patience I'll have with it if they end up making another game. Hell, even continue making them past that. Not to mention, Nigma seemed even crazier in this game, which was probably the point, but the fact that he managed to build all these racetracks for you to do with the Batmobile, not knowing Batman was even going to use it in the first place, seems a little too coincidental for its own good. His motivations feel a little moronic in this game, just saying. Another staple character of the Arkham franchise that makes his return in Arkham Knight is the Joker, once again played by Mark Hamill, despite his death at the end of Arkham City, and the fact that you play as a police officer at the beginning of this game that burns his body to a crisp. The Joker is able to return psychologically through Batman as the Dark Knight comes in contact with some of Scarecrow's fear gas early on in the game and begins to hallucinate his fallen foe. Not only is Batman grieving over his death in a way, he hasn't been able to truly get past it yet, but the remnants of Joker's blood within his body from the events of the previous game is slowly turning Batman into a Joker due to its mutated properties from the Titan formula in Arkham Asylum. While Joker does manage to force himself into the game's narrative, it's at least interesting here, and he doesn't hijack any attention away from Scarecrow and Arkham Knight, unlike he did with Black Mask in Arkham Origins. I enjoy the Joker's role as this evil thought on Batman's shoulder, one he must constantly walk a fine line with so as not to lose control. The Joker gives unique insight throughout key moments in the game, and you really get a sense of the internal struggle going on within Batman. I loved it. By the end, when Batman is exposed to even larger concentrated doses of Scarecrow's fear toxin, we get to play as the Joker himself within the confines of Batman's mind. At first, he seems to be in control, but as we play, we come to realize the deepest fears of the Joker. He's afraid to be forgotten, lost among the crowd. Eventually, he is overwhelmed by Batman, who locks him away for good, and finally accepts the death of his archenemy. He can finally put the Joker to rest. While I find all the psychological stuff between Batman and the Joker to be some of the strongest and most thought-provoking elements of this game that dives even further into their relationship than many other Batman stories explore, it brings along with it a lot of other baggage as well. Ideas that really expose the game's weaker aspects in terms of writing and its story as a whole. I mentioned that the traces of the mutated Joker blood within Batman from the events of Arkham City are slowly transforming him into a Joker. On top of that, you are introduced to several other people that were treated with Joker's blood when he shipped it to hospitals all across the city, something Joker mentioned in the previous game. Batman and the GCPD were unable to stop it all, and apparently these 4 souls were the only ones affected by it, all transforming into Jokers themselves, and Batman has been trying to find a cure. Batman is of course the 5th individual affected by Joker's blood, which he reveals later in the game, hence why all this stuff is happening in his mind. Again, I enjoy the psychological back and forth between Batman and the Joker in this game, but I feel this whole subplot with his blood physically transforming people into versions of himself to be a little too far-fetched even for the world established in the Arkham series. It borders on supernatural, and they try to explain it medically, but it just doesn't work. I feel it was completely unnecessary and didn't even make sense when you take into account Batman administered a cure on himself at the end of Arkham City. He shouldn't be affected by Joker's blood at this point, technically speaking, and the fact that he is just makes all of this feel so forced and contrived, it isn't even funny. Also, only 4 people were affected by the blood? Are you serious? Joker said in Arkham City he had been shipping his blood for weeks prior to the events of the game. I doubt only 4 were given it, spanning every hospital in Gotham. I call bullshit. I give credit to Rocksteady for trying something new that hadn't been attempted before in a Batman-Joker story like this, but even still, it's just way too bizarre for its own good. There are brief moments of glory, but it has more to do with the characters themselves and the performances of their voice actors, not because of this strange Joker transformation subplot. The psychological battle between Batman and the Joker didn't need all of this in order to happen. Batman was in many ways distraught and lacking focus after the Joker's death. He was affected by Scarecrow's fear gas. That's all he really needed. He had to find it in himself to get over the death of the Joker and bury him for good. Making it so that Batman and these other 4 people are transforming into Joker seemed way too weird and leads to many cringeworthy moments and lines of dialogue. I hate to say it, but it's by far the most glaring and weakest element of the entire game in my opinion. I don't know what they were thinking when they wrote it. Alright, let's finally get to it. The Arkham Knight, the title character of Batman Arkham Knight, who serves as the game's secondary antagonist. On paper, I really do enjoy this idea, a militarized anti-Batman that doesn't hesitate when it comes to using guns, armed militia, and even drone tanks to get the job done. Mind you, the fact that he uses tanks that don't have anyone inside of them makes Arkham Knight appear quite incompetent, the complete opposite of his partner Scarecrow. If he really wanted to strike hard at Batman like he says he wants to, you'd think he'd force him to kill. But but I digress. Arkham Knight's appearance is pretty badass, having a more tech-heavy design than that of Batman, especially with his mask. The Arkham Knight has a personal vendetta as well as history with the Dark Knight, and will stop at nothing to kill him, even though the Scarecrow has to hold him back at several points throughout the story. Arkham Knight wants to be over and done with it, but Scarecrow wants to see Batman suffer first. I like the partnership between the Arkham Knight and Scarecrow. It's fun, but their motivations don't really mesh as strongly as they should, given a team-up of this scale. They both want to attack Batman, but in entirely different ways. Scarecrow needs the muscle the Arkham Knight provides, but if the Arkham Knight really wanted to kill Batman, he wouldn't need Scarecrow. He has an entire army, just go kill him. Simple. I find most of the hate for this game is targeted primarily at the Arkham Knight himself. Rocksteady promoted him as this completely new character, stressing that his identity was some big mystery. While that is technically correct on both fronts, he has never appeared before in the Arkham universe, and when you first pick up and play this game, you don't really know who he is. The vagueness of these statements are too easy for someone to misconstrue. Many of us believed he would be a well-known Batman villain from the comics or earlier games, donning the costume of his greatest adversary. Would it be Hugo Strange, somehow brought back to life? How about Hush, who had unfinished business with Bruce Wayne and Batman at the end of Arkham City? Nope. Arkham Knight turned out to be an already established character with a different coat of paint. I mentioned that when you first pick up and play this game, you don't know who the Arkham Knight is, and I mean that, at least for the first 20 minutes or so. Any hardcore Batman fan could easily guess his identity from a mile away. Hell, even someone somewhat familiar with the comics and mythology in general would know. The longer the Arkham Knight is on screen, and the more he talks, the quicker this long list of potential candidates shrinks to just one, and the game never tries to veer you away from it. Honestly, I would have admired Rocksteady's choice a little bit more if they had even taken the effort to provide us with a few red herrings within the narrative to distract you, confuse you, make you follow the wrong trail of breadcrumbs or something, but we got nothing. Any good mystery story, especially one featuring a secret identity like this, needs a few red herrings. That's what makes the final reveal so surprising. You didn't see it coming, because the story finds ways to trick your assumptions. Who Rocksteady chose isn't necessarily the reason all this didn't work, and why I think it was lazy. It's how they told the story and revealed him. There was no effort. They didn't follow the basic structure of an effective mystery character. The Arkham Knight was revealed in the end as Jason Todd, the second Robin who was captured, beaten, tortured, and seemingly killed by the Joker within the confines of Arkham Asylum. Batman was sent video evidence of his murder and believed him to be dead. However, Todd survived and blamed Batman for abandoning him. In his traumatized state, the Joker also got to him, and in an effort to kill his former mentor, Todd donned the guise of the Arkham Knight and would team up with the Scarecrow to take him down. Though this idea is really cool, and the Arkham Knight is his own character in a way, being the identity Jason Todd takes on after Robin, but before becoming Red Hood, his similarities to the latter are what upset a lot of fans. The Arkham Knight was the result of Todd being beaten and killed within Arkham Asylum, as opposed to the warehouse which turned him into the Red Hood in the comics, not to mention all the Lazarus Pit stuff. Here, Todd falls victim to Joker's torture and manipulation, being turned against Batman, twisted into some pet project of Joker's. As the Arkham Knight, Todd's motivations are slightly different as well, more naive and in their infancy compared to that of Red Hood. The Arkham Knight is willing to team up with Batman's villains, whereas with Red Hood, at least some incarnations of him, he wants to kill them as a way to succeed where Batman failed, wasting his time arresting them over and over again. Also, the Red Hood doesn't necessarily want to kill Batman per se, just send a message, do what he didn't have the balls to in his eyes. Currently, Red Hood has become more of an anti-heroic character as well, whereas Arkham Knight is a straight-up villain. It's not until the end of the game when Jason Todd turns good, or at least as good as you're gonna get at that point. Despite all this, again, the fact that Arkham Knight was essentially Red Hood with a new coat of paint was the problem. I think fans wanted a lot more from the reveal, myself included. The honest simple truth is, though, I don't believe choosing villains like Hugo Strange, Hush, or any other character fans had speculated would have worked either, because no matter who Rocksteady chose, someone out there would have hated it. We all had that one character we wanted it to be, and if it turned out to be another, naturally, you would have been left disappointed. It was inevitable. If anything, Rocksteady played it safe choosing Todd. At least that way they are drawing from something iconic and recognizable among fans and the mainstream alike. Was it the ideal choice? Maybe not, but the safest? I think so. And this leads me to the question, who should have been the Arkham Knight? Well, I'm not going to go through my entire list of potential candidates because they are all the same characters you would have chosen. Hugo Strange, Hush, maybe even Anarchy for that matter, because after all, he wanted to be like Batman, he just didn't agree with his methods. And if Rocksteady was going to incorporate references to Arkham Origins, including Anarchy, then why not? I think he would have been a good fit. But it's been years since this game came out, and in hindsight, I think they should have avoided using any notable villains or characters from the comics entirely. They should have picked someone from the Arkham universe itself. That way, the Arkham Knight would have been entirely original, and you wouldn't run the risk of disappointing fans, or having to alter already established motivations within iconic Batman villains. So, there is one person I think would have been a great choice for the Arkham Knight, and would have made for a surprising reveal. Hear me out here, you need to suspend your disbelief a little bit with this one, but what about Penelope Young from Arkham Asylum? She died in that explosion in the first game and her body is left there, showing her as deceased, but what if Batman was under the effects of Scarecrow's fear gas more than he thought? What if Penelope survived, and much like Jason Todd, was traumatized by the inmates at the asylum, such as Joker or Zaz? I mean, she was stalked and tormented by the Joker when he wanted her Titan formula. What if she just snapped? Much like Todd, what if she blamed Batman for abandoning her, believing she was dead? It's a stretch that she would get militarized training at that point and know Batman inside and out. Then again, the character didn't need to have that in the first place. But I think Penelope working with Scarecrow would make more sense than it did with Todd, and maybe after she found out it was Scarecrow's fear gas that caused Batman to abandon her in the first place, that's what causes her change of heart, maybe even teaming up with Batman to stop him in the end. Again, this is a stretch, and you would need to seal the gaps a bit more in terms of the narrative, but I think Penelope Young would have made for an interesting Arkham Knight at least. The voice modulator, armor giving her the appearance of a male, it would have made for a cool gender bend type character, in the same vein as the Phantasm or something. Having the Arkham Knight a female would have instantly made the final reveal more surprising because you wouldn't have seen it coming. It would have subverted your expectations because everyone would have assumed the Arkham Knight was a man. It would have been a way to fix the lack of red herrings too, and because her motivations would have been similar enough to Jason Todd and Red Hood, it would have shocked you as well when it turned out to be her instead. Keep in mind, Young was also a psychiatrist in the same way Jonathan Crane was, and having two of them targeting Batman's psyche like that would have worked wonders. I know all this is a stretch, and in some areas, it's a bit messy, but I find it a lot more interesting and unique than just picking Jason Todd as the Arkham Knight. If you have someone better from the Arkham universe that isn't from the comics, I'm all ears. But unfortunately, this concept of mine is dead, lying on the floor in the Arkham Mansion. Let's finally get to Gotham itself. The game world here is the biggest the franchise has had thus far, and is filled to the brim with Easter eggs, much like the previous games were, and even references to other characters within the larger DC universe, like Lex Luthor, Green Arrow, and The Flash, among others. Arkham Knight's Gotham is massive, vibrant, and downright beautiful. Traversing it with the gliding system here is the most satisfying it has ever been in this series, and when you have the grapnel boost fully upgraded, the distance you cover with each one is just unbelievable. You soar through the sky with crazy speeds, and the rain effects and lighting of the city just add to the game's overall atmosphere and feel. Some people have been critical of the fact that the majority of this game's story takes place outside and not within indoor environments, but with a game world this big and a traversal system this huge, you kind of need to be. Arkham Asylum worked because it was confined and claustrophobic, but a story like Arkham Knight's wouldn't be effective being told in that way. Yeah, the Arkham games seem to be using less and less indoor environments as they've went on, but it makes sense. There are still many indoor sections, just not as much. but it's not something that really bothers me. Another thing I find people complain about is the fact that Gotham is empty yet again, without any civilians. Arkham City featured a walled-off portion of old Gotham turned into a mega-prison, so it made sense that there would be no citizens in it. In Arkham Knight, the threat of Scarecrow's bomb causes a city-wide evacuation, which again makes sense. I don't know why so many people nitpick about this. It's a much greater explanation than what we got in Arkham Origins. A terrible snowstorm? Really? Wow, it's really coming down, guys. Having civilians in these games would be far too much work to animate, and variables that would affect the story in far too many ways. Honestly, they would just get in the way of everything. Eliminate them. It's much easier that way. Gliding isn't your only means of transportation across Gotham because, like I had mentioned earlier in the video, the Batmobile makes its debut in the game for the first time in the series. If you've seen my previous reviews of the Arkham titles, then you would know the Batmobile wasn't something I really wanted or felt was needed in these games. Sure, I always thought about driving it back in the days of Arkham Asylum, but that was mainly just fantasy. I knew by incorporating a ground vehicle into games like this that focused more on combat and gliding in the air, you were going to be faced with problems regardless of how well you did it. The Batmobile would come down to simply being eye candy and fan service, not much more than that. And that's exactly what it ended up being. You can drive the Batmobile if you want, but it's so much faster gliding in the air, especially when you fully upgrade the grapnel boost. So what's the point of using it in the first place? Mind you, I'm not someone who hates on the Batmobile in this game. I enjoyed it. After 2 games of using a gliding system, and one basically involving you just running from point A to point B, it provides some much needed variety to Arkham Knight's gaming experience. Even when you switch it to its battle mode, the way you fight Arkham Knight's drones, I think it works well enough and once again provides some fun variety on top of everything else this game, and series as a whole, offers. A lot of people complained that they rammed the Batmobile down your throat, forcing you to use it to solve various puzzles throughout the game, fight drone tanks, or even have you scan the environment to follow breadcrumbs. But again, what did you expect? They needed to have it serve some sort of purpose within the game's narrative because you can glide much faster without it. The rationality of using it as a form of transportation is essentially non-existent. And if the Batmobile would have somehow been integrated into Arkham City or Arkham Origins, the same thing would have happened. It would have sat there collecting dust because no one would have really used it. These games don't ooze Batmobile driving, they're about stealth, combat, detective work. If you expected the Batmobile to be anything other than just fan service and eye candy alone, without them having to force it down your throat at times, then you were greatly mistaken. Again, I enjoy the Batmobile in this game. In fact, I have a soft spot for it. But I see it for what it is, an option if I get tired of gliding and want more variety. A way to feel like Batman and get to drive the Batmobile, live my childhood fantasy. But for those of you that complain that they forced you to use it too much, you asked for it. Like I said, I didn't need the Batmobile in these games. They didn't need it to be successful telling their stories. When fans demand stuff like this, fan service is really all you're going to get in return. Stop complaining and enjoy your Batmobile. It ruined the game in some ways, I'll get to that in a second, which doesn't really have anything to do with the car itself, but still. With a game series focusing on stealth and combat, it shouldn't be surprising that a driving element would complicate things. You knew it would happen. Batman Arkham Knight is the best game in the series in terms of its gameplay. The combat controls are slick and smooth, completely responsive. Batman's arsenal of moves have been expanded upon even further to include more epic and satisfying counter and strike animations. There are more quick-fire gadgets to use, and takedown combinations for Predator sequences. The upgrade trees in the menu are easy to navigate, and just look at how many things you can do in this game. Just about anything you can think of. Anything Batman would do, you can do. I don't think it's necessary that I go through each and every one in this video. Just play it and find out for yourself. I will say that I loved a lot of the new enemy types though, most notably the medic, which can not only heal fallen allies, but protect them with electrical barriers that force you to change up your strategy in combat scenarios. In terms of the Predator encounters, something that I didn't mention in my review of Arkham City is that I love that they forced you to turn off detective mode at times and not use it as a crutch like you did in the first game, exploiting it way too much and going overboard. Here, much like in Arkham City, you have enemies that have hacked Batman's detective vision, making it useless, and even new ones that can use it as a tracker to find you if you keep it on for too long. These additions were great. The new hacking device was cool too, allowing you to take over drones and electrocute nearby enemies. Though Arkham Knight provides you with many more gameplay challenges, I still feel it's the easiest game in the franchise, even on the hardest difficulties. The vast array of moves and gadgets at your disposal make you feel very overpowered. The enemies in this game don't stand a chance. Arkham Knight introduces new fear takedowns, which are fucking badass as hell and make you feel like Batman, picking off guys one by one, but unfortunately, they are the most broken gameplay element in this game in my opinion, and yes, even on the hardest difficulty. When you have it fully upgraded, you can chain 5 of them together, and all you have to do to charge it back up again is perform a single silent takedown. That's it. They make Predator encounters a breeze and remind me of the remote claw and shock gloves from Arkham Origins. Mind you, they aren't that broken. Even the Batmobile sequences when you take out those big tanks aren't really that hard when you know what upgrades to get. The most useful is the one that allows you to lure the big bastards out with your 60mm cannon. All you have to do at that point is sneak up behind them and wham! Rinse and repeat. Like I said, Arkham Knight is a little too easy in my opinion. Even with all the added challenge, they just made Batman too damn powerful in the end. If one strategy doesn't work, you have like 10 others and all of them are relatively simple to pull off. You're literally a one-man army in this game. Nothing can stand in your way. Though Batman Arkham Knight is head and shoulders above every other title in the franchise in terms of gameplay, one thing it didn't manage to impress a lot of fans with were its boss battles. For a series that features some pretty epic hero-villain confrontations, especially the one in the previous game with Mr. Freeze, I myself couldn't have been more excited with what we were in store for here in Arkham Knight, being that this was on the next generation of consoles. There was no way we would be left disappointed, right? Well, unfortunately we were. Most of them involved the usage of the Batmobile, which further annoyed anyone who was already on thin ice with it, given its forced nature within the rest of the game. Even the battles that didn't involve the vehicle in any way were far from spectacular. Mind you, some of them I did enjoy, like the one with the Cloudburst tank and the Arkham Knight's drill, as they both served a purpose within the narrative. Even the Arkham Knight's helicopter, which was a great way to get you familiar with the Batmobile's combat controls at the beginning. With all that said, there just needed to be more variety. The main villains in this game aren't given grand head-to-head battles with Batman, which is a real shame. The Joker's fear-induced takeover of Batman's mind at the end of the game features a boss battle of sorts, but it's more or less a combat challenge with endless enemies, and you only play it until a cutscene takes over. With Arkham Knight, it's essentially a Predator room that has you sneak to a specific vantage point, that's it. In Arkham Knight's instance, it should have definitely been a more physical confrontation akin to that of Deathstroke in Arkham Origins. I think his character was given the shortest end of the stick when you take into account all the villains in this game. They built him up as such a threat, but in the end, he really wasn't. And speaking of Deathstroke, he's in this game as well, as the individual who takes over Arkham Knight's militia after you have beaten the main game and completed all militia-related side missions. His boss battle is almost identical to the Cloudburst one, just that his tank is surrounded by even more drones you have to defeat first. And yes, you battle Deathstroke in a tank, not with hand-to-hand combat. A lot of people were upset with this, but honestly, he felt tacked onto the game following the release of Arkham Origins. He was probably added in late in development, so I don't know why anyone would have expected much out of him. If I were to pick the best boss battle in the game, it'd have to be the Riddler, and that's not saying much at all, seeing as he is mainly just side mission filler in the grand scheme of things and not part of the main narrative. Like I said, I do enjoy the Batmobile battles with the Arkham Knight's drill, and even the Cloudburst tank, but the game needed more variety, and having an actual physical battle between Batman and Arkham Knight would have made the most sense. Even a psychological one with Scarecrow, in the same vein as his encounters from Arkham Asylum, would have worked too. All in all, the boss battles in Arkham Knight were extremely disappointing and non-existent. The Season of Infamy DLC did remedy this a bit with Killer Croc, for example, but even still, he's not part of the main game, so I won't really count it. Now I do want to point out again that Batman is severely overpowered in this game compared to all other previous installments. Does that mean you should go easy on the boss battles in Arkham Knight? No, not really. They were still very disappointing. But realize if this Batman found himself in any of the amazing boss battles in previous games, he would wipe the floor with them, and they would pose no challenge. I think in some ways, Rocksteady backed themselves into a corner, giving this Batman so many gadgets, combat moves, and new takedowns at his disposal that it became almost impossible to make any compelling boss battles that would have put all these skills to the test, especially in later parts of the game. Mind you, comparing Arkham Knight with its previous installments in that regard isn't really fair, and I say it would have been nearly impossible, but I'm not a game designer, I have no idea. If Rocksteady added all these new stuff into the game, they should have been able to counter it in some way. Isn't that how making a video game like this works? If they weren't able to, then maybe some of these overpowered elements needed to be scrapped in favor of the story, in favor of the boss battles, in favor of the player's overall experience. I don't know. So let's finally end this review. Batman Arkham Knight is by far the best looking game in the entire franchise. In terms of its gameplay, it also stretches high above everything that had come before, and for the first time in this series, truly makes you feel like Batman inside and out, with almost every aspect of the game fueling this notion and making it a reality. With that said, though Arkham Knight reaches the highest of highs the Arkham franchise has to offer, it also manages to sink to its lowest of lows as well. It can be a bit of a mixed bag at times. I think when Arkham Knight is bad, it's really bad, and these moments are some of the most revealing in all the Arkham titles. Having said that, none of the issues I mentioned in this video break the game in any way. It's playable, enjoyable, and a great Batman story featuring one of my favorite Batman villains. Did it take a few risks that didn't pay off? Yes. Was it disappointing in some regard? Absolutely. But is it a terrible game? Fuck no. Arkham Knight might not be the best superhero game out there. It might not even be the best Batman game, depending on who you ask. But it still far surpasses the majority of superhero games on the market. You can't be too picky with it. At least it was made with some level of competence that can't always be said in the genre. I want to end this video by simply asking, where have the Batman Arkham games gone? There are so many stories that could be told with these characters, especially if they went back to the earlier days of Batman's crime-fighting career. I have heard rumors, but until verified, they are just that. Rumors, speculation, conspiracies, what have you. Until we get some sort of legit statement declaring another Batman Arkham game is in development, then I believe this series is dead as of right now. I want to be wrong, trust me I do, but as the days have turned to months and the months into years, I have less and less faith as time goes on. Hopefully they continue this Batman Arkham series, and if not, create some new franchise borrowing elements from it, who knows. Despite losing the battle in terms of live-action films in recent years, DC has dominated the market in terms of animation and video games for far too long. I'd hate to see them just stop and allow Marvel to rise from the ashes and dominate yet another form of mainstream media. Marvel is making an impact with games like Spider-Man on PS4 and the upcoming Avengers game, and if they keep it going, they will be the new talk of the town. DC needs to return in a big way very soon, because day after day, outside of the comic books and animated films, they keep letting many of us down in terms of movies and video games, Injustice and the like being the only real exceptions. The world needs more Batman, it needs more Arkham. Here's to hoping the franchise isn't really gone, at least not yet. Batman Arkham Knight had quite a lot of downloadable content, which is why I am reviewing it in a separate video today. If you purchased the Season Pass upon the game's release, you would have been given various additional content spanning the following 6 months. Anything from new skins for Batman and the Batmobile, to racetracks inspired by various movies or television shows over the years, and even story packs that added to the greater Arkham universe. First and foremost, I want to talk about the story add-ons, known collectively as Arkham episodes, that had you play as various heroes and villains from the Arkham series. Starting off with the Red Hood story pack, this one took place after the events of the main game, following Jason Todd's decision to cease being the Arkham Knight and officially taking on the mantle of the Red Hood, a new anti-hero in Gotham. The Red Hood story pack is essentially 3 challenge rooms, 2 combat and 1 predator, with brief cutscenes in between to connect them all with a branching narrative. It has Todd track down the Black Mask, whose design is similar to the one found in Arkham Origins, and ends with him throwing him out the window, killing the villain. The story may feel a bit rushed and lackluster, but then again, this DLC was a pre-order bonus, so it makes sense. I actually don't mind it because you get to play as Red Hood and shoot guys with his pistols. He has an entirely different feel to that of Batman because his takedowns are more loud and aggressive. All I really needed was a few challenge rooms linked with a narrative. It's fine by me. Harley Quinn's story pack has a bit more meat on its bones, seeing you infiltrate the Bloodhaven police station and break out Poison Ivy for a meeting between Scarecrow, Penguin, and the other villains, setting in motion the events of the main game. Again, this one feels a little rushed, but at least it's paced a lot better than the Red Hood one, with Penguin and Harley having some great dialogue in between tasks. You also have brief sequences of problem solving, having to destroy walls with Harley Quinn's Jack-in-the-Box, but again, they're brief and not that impressive. Her Predator encounters are really fun because much like Red Hood, she's all about making noise. I also enjoyed the battle at the end, which has you face off against Nightwing, a cool role reversal, something we weren't familiar with up until that point in the franchise. Nightwing had his own DLC story mission entitled GCPD Lockdown, which was the first actual episode to come out following the game's release if I recall. The Red Hood and Harley Quinn ones were pre-orders, I think. GCPD Lockdown is one of my least favorite of the episodes, because not only is it rushed yet again, but it feels even more artificial than the previous ones I mentioned. It plays more like the Red Hood one, where you do a few combat encounters, mixed in with some stealth ones, all while cutscenes link everything together. It should have played more like Harley Quinn's, where you are at least walking through the areas from point A to point B, and having to get through a few obstacles in your path. Some of the later episodes would play like that too, which was great. With GCPD Lockdown, there isn't even a final boss battle of sorts either, and instead, there is just this large and unnecessarily long Predator encounter. It takes place within the police headquarters and spans several floors. They fill it with as much guys as possible to really pad out the length of this DLC, and it shows. After you beat it and pull a few switches, you stop Penguin's breakout, and that's it. I would have at least enjoyed a combat sequence with him or something. Anything than what we got. It's so anticlimactic. Moving on to Catwoman's Revenge, and this one is the bottom of the barrel, the worst of all the episodes in my opinion, but for all the wrong reasons. Given the title, you get to play as Catwoman, getting her revenge on the Riddler for what he did to her during the main game, breaking into his hideout and stealing all his money. While it's a fun setup and a great concept behind one of these episodes, not to mention it utilizes problem solving more than any of the others, its fatal flaw comes at the end when you have to hack Riddler's computer and transfer all his funds to Catwoman's account. You fight a large group of Riddler robots as the floor around you becomes more and more electrified. You can't fuck up here, or at least very little, so try not to get hit too many times or lose your combo, and whatever you do, ignore doing any takedowns because they take way too long to perform. They give you just enough time to defeat all the bots before the floor becomes completely electrified, killing you within seconds. You need to focus on keeping the combo up and performing critical strikes. They do the most damage. I fucking hate this part, and it brings this entire episode down several pegs. It's far too challenging, especially for what should only really be a simple DLC add-on. I've beaten it, of course, on multiple difficulties, but those of you out there who haven't played these games as much as I have, or hell, haven't played Arkham Knight in a long while, will have issues with it. It's not fun when you have to play it over and over again to master it. Again, this is just a DLC add-on. Why make it this challenging? I know why, to pad out its length, in response to all the complaints of the episodes before. You cheap, unforgiving sons of bitches. Next up is a flip of a coin, starring Robin as he goes up against Two-Face, set after the events of the main game, and following Batman's disappearance with the Nightfall Protocol. Out of all the Arkham episodes, this was the one I was looking forward to the most, because if you've seen my reviews of Arkham City, and even Arkham Knight for that matter, I had brought up the fact that Two-Face was one of the villains that hadn't really been given the proper treatment in the Arkham franchise, at least in my opinion. City had him thrown aside in favor of the Joker and Penguin primarily, with Catwoman taking him on in a Predator encounter at the end, in her final DLC mission mind you. With Arkham Knight, he was given a bit more to do, but it still ended in a lackluster Predator encounter. Two-Face deserved more. So I was hoping a flip of a coin would remedy all that and give us a more satisfying confrontation with Two-Face. In some ways it delivers on that, and in other ways it doesn't. I do enjoy the visuals of the episode because after all, it revolves around Two-Face entirely, and much like the Catwoman and Harley Quinn stories, there are a few points where you actually need to use problem solving to get past a certain obstacle in your way. But in the end, what we get with Two-Face is a simple combat challenge. I would have preferred to at least fight him as well, seeing as the last two encounters you had with him in these games were Predator. At least then it would have felt different. But no, you beat all his goons and then an in-game cutscene takes over. He shoots Robin, flips his coin to decide whether or not to finish him, and you take him down and catch it instead. While a flip of a coin ends in a rather anticlimactic way, much like many of these episodes, I do still enjoy it to a certain extent. When you add up all the Two-Face content we got in all these games, he does get a fair bit of time in the spotlight. His presence isn't huge or the ideal amount you'd like to see of him, but he's treated much better than some of the other villains, all things considered. Maybe we'll get to see him in a future game, who knows. And last but certainly not least, let's take a look at Batgirl: A Matter of Family, the most defined and layered of all the Arkham episodes in this game, that actually feels more like the previous DLC story expansions, Harley Quinn's Revenge from Arkham City, and Cold Cold Heart from Arkham Origins, though unfortunately A Matter of Family still falls a bit short of both those. A Matter of Family lets you play as Batgirl for the first time in the series, and references a story mentioned in one of the riddles in the main game when you reveal Batgirl's costume within the clock tower. It tells of Barbara Gordon, as Batgirl, rescuing her father, the Commissioner, from the clutches of the Joker and Harley Quinn at the condemned Seagate amusement park built on top of an old oil rig. The amusement park itself is one of this add-on's strongest elements because its atmosphere is very eerie and there is an unsettling tone to the whole thing. As you explore it, you'll find a jump scare referencing the Batman animated series episode, The Laughing Fish, balloons that look identical to the ones used in the 1989 Batman film, and even uncover the sad history behind the park involving its creator and his sick daughter who died before it was complete. I like playing as Batgirl, and some of her combat animations are very satisfying to pull off. She also focuses on hacking more so than Batman, and you can turn various objects in the environment against your enemies, which can be a lot of fun. The DLC also features Robin, who helps her along the way, but for some reason, they put him in the costume he had during Arkham Knight, despite A Matter of Family taking place before the events of Arkham Asylum. A bit of a continuity error there. The same can be said about James Gordon. Did they even make an attempt with that? Every time I play this story, I switch Robin's costume to look like one Tim Drake would have wore earlier in his career. It just makes more sense that way. A Matter of Family is definitely the best Arkham episode in terms of length and overall content, but like I said, it still falls a little flat, especially compared to Harley Quinn's Revenge and Cold Cold Heart. It doesn't do anything that spectacular, and its writing isn't that impressive, kind of by the numbers, and lacking any real oomph to the whole thing. If the Arkham episodes get you down, one thing that will lighten the mood and always manage to put a smile on your face are the Batmobile races, based off various live-action incarnations of Batman over the years, from the campy 1960s TV series, to the Tim Burton films, even Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. Being able to drive on these themed racetracks is a lot of fun and a welcomed addition to the game. They feel very pick up and play, and depending on which type of race you choose, 1 lap or 3, don't take that long to complete. You can even switch out the Batmobile skins and free roam the city if you've completed the main story. Unfortunately, they can't transform into a battle mode, which limits their functionality. You can't beat the story with them. A lot of people claimed that the season pass of Arkham Knight wasn't worth it in the end, that the $50 or so you paid for it was too much for all this DLC. I couldn't disagree more though. If you add up everything, including all the races, challenge maps, episodes, Season of Infamy side missions that were added to the main game, costumes, various Batmobiles, this was a lot of content and the majority of it was satisfying all things considered. Yeah, the Arkham episodes were lackluster and short, but even still, we got a lot of goodies for what it was all worth. I can't complain too much because I had a lot of fun with most of it, and still do, even years after the game's release. Some people might get upset over it, but then again, put it into perspective. PS1 games, even NES games, used to cost as much as this season pass, and some of them I've played aren't worth anything. Times have changed and I'm not trying to cut up older consoles, but again, realize how far we've come. I feel we got a lot of bang for our buck with this season pass, and anyone who bitches about it either didn't grow up with older consoles or is expecting far too much from DLC. Anyways, that ends my review. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and bell icon to be notified of all future content I release on here. Also, you can help support me over on patreon.com/channel-nerdgasm to make videos like these possible and help keep my YouTube dream alive. As always, I will see you in the next one. Take care and stay nerdy.